3, 2, 1. How we doing, Levi?
Doing good.
Doing good?
Interesting intro, yeah.
We got Pistol Pete in the house. Pistol Pete. God, it's been a long time since I've seen you. What have you been up to, man?
Like since high school or since...
Well, yeah, since high school. I mean,
Oh, boy.
it's the last time that's the last time
it's-
since like a lot of us have seen you.
It's been a fucking minute. Let's see. I enlisted in the Marine Corps when I was like 17, like halfway through senior year. So went to that. Went to boot camp, MCT, CBRN training. Had a bunch of seizures. Got med-sept out.
Yeah, so what happened with that?
Apparently, if you smell a lot of funny gases, it gives you seizures. Like, for our, group going through, 3 out of 50 of us had seizures, and they were like, oh, that's definitely not related to the training at all.
3 out of 50
Yeah, and that's,
in the group.
yeah, 3 out of 50 in the crew going through. But, yeah, apparently that's typical, or like the average number. It's kind of like how the guys who do like radio operator, like half of them are sterile, and then the Marine Corps is like, no, that's not related to their MOS at all.
Is that a real thing?
Yeah.
Radio operators, like half of them are sterile?
Yeah, I don't know about half, but yeah, it is a significantly more than average percentage of them can't have kids anymore. But
That's fucked up. Be a radio operator in the Marines, and you go home and try to have kids, and then you leave for deployment, and your wife has kids, and you're like, hey, I'm fucking sterile, bitch.
yeah,
Turn up Levi's mic too.
for the typical Marine, it saves them a lot of child support, though.
I imagine that's true. Yeah, I imagine that is true because I feel like if you're deployed somewhere, like, and you don't have a family back home, like, why not be a slut? You know?
Yeah, and there just really isn't a great track record. Yeah, oh my God, the stats don't look good for Marines who get married in their first 4 years. It's like kind of this whole thing where basically you'll be stuck in like the barracks and it's really shitty and you want to get out of there as soon as you can.
Yeah.
And if you're married, you get extra pay to pay for your housing and you get to not be in the barracks, which is why so many Marines go out and marry a stripper and then they get to live off base and then they get divorced like 3 months later. Yeah.
Damn.
That's
So-
pretty standard.
So what happens if you get married and then like you get divorced? Do they like they're like, you don't have a wife anymore, like you're going back onto base, buddy?
Yeah, and they take like half your pay for the rest of your life.
Oh. But what happens if you get
It's-
remarried? Then do you get all that back or not all that
It's a good
back?
question,
but
I guess. I know it's not a good situation.
that's hilarious. Well, that's not hilarious because like that I feel like that ruins a lot of people's lives, but
Oh yeah, but it's still pretty hilarious.
it is pretty funny. It's just like, kids just being kids, I guess.
Yeah,
Just trying to figure out adult life, and it's not easy. Adult life sucks.
yeah.
So, so that was just like funny gases. Like, what kind of training caused those seizures to happen?
I don't know. It's a good question. Well, like CBRN just does a lot of weird stuff where like it's a really weird mix because you have to be smart enough to get into CBRN but dumb enough to join the Marine Corps. So it's it's kind of a weird cross section of people. And yeah, you're the guys who like run the gas chamber and stuff like that. And
The what?
the gas chamber. Okay, so
Running gas chambers?
Yeah.
To this day?
well, it's not
What
lethal.
Okay, what is the gas chamber for? What is it?
It's like CS. Oh, it is. It's not super fun, but it's like CS gas, so it's like
Like tear gas?
kind of pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Less, it's easier than like getting OC sprayed and stuff like that, but anyone who goes into,
What's OC spray?
that's like a really strong mace. I don't know. I know a lot of people recognize that because that's what police officers have to go through and stuff like that. They all get OC'd, which apparently isn't super fun either. But
Oh, I imagine. Can't
Yeah.
even imagine that. That would fucking suck. That's like putting like jalapenos or like habaneros like right in your fucking eyes.
yeah, my brother actually, when he went through it with a lady who had like 3 or 4 kids, and when they got done, she's like, "Yeah, I would much rather have a kid. That is way easier than getting OC spread again."
Oh my god. Fuck that.
Yeah.
But you were saying, so what are these gas chambers again?
Oh yeah, I don't know. It's to get you used to it, I guess. So like if we back up, I guess, so CBRN is the job, which stands for Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear Defense Specialist. And so it's just the catch-all for all that weird shit. And as a CBRN Marine, your job is to make sure your unit is trained And basically, they won't die if they get hit with sarin gas. Your job is to train them for that, and then the gas chamber is part of that. You go in like with a gas mask on to make sure it actually works, but then you like take it off, do a bunch of stuff, and then you like put it back on, clear it and stuff like that. They call it training, but it's like a rite of passage, I guess. I don't know.
Damn. And so that from that kind of training, like you ended up having seizures plus 3 other people out of 50. Out of
I don't know.
50 people, that's a lot.
It was a
That's
statistical
more than
anomaly.
1%. That's 6% of people get seizures.
So
Yeah.
I imagine you're in like full gear pretty much when you're going through this. Do you have like anything other than a helmet? They give you like face masks, you're just like breathing in gas pretty much.
You get an M50. That's what you have on at first. You're not in like full kit or anything. You're just in your camis.
Okay.
M50, I guess it's what you imagine a gas mask looks like, and you have it on, and so it's making sure, I guess, theoretically what it's supposed to be doing is making sure you actually know how to use it, and then you take it off, and then put it back on, and then you know how to clear it and stuff like that. But, yeah, it's more so just hazing, but
It's more so just hazing.
yeah.
Do people do they get to watch behind like a one-way mirror or something
No,
like that?
no,
And get to-
it looks like a gas chamber.
Oh god, that's scary. Is it?
Yeah.
Are there showers in there? Is that how you release the gas?
No, there is not.
That's fucked up. That was a bad joke. I'm sorry. But so you ended up having seizures in the military. So I imagine they discharged you.
Mhm.
Honorably discharged.
Yes and no. Yes, but technically I was still in training status, so I don't get.
Any benefits?
It's a general.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. Does the Marine pay for college? Do the Marines pay for college?
Yes and no. I don't know. Depending on how much you want me to get into it, kind of they do. If you do 4 years and get out honorably, you get the post 9/11 GI Bill, and then that will basically pay for it. It'll cover almost all your tuition, or in most cases all of it, and then give you a stipend for housing and stuff like that, depending on the area you're in.
Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet. Because I know I talked to Bryce, and he's in the Marines currently, and
Yes.
I asked him, I was like, so they pay for your like college and stuff, and he's like, nope. And I was like, what? Like, I'm pretty sure that's what's supposed to happen. Like, they're supposed to pay for part of your college at least. And he's like, no, he's like, I don't qualify or anything like that. And I was like, I fucking don't understand that at
Is he
all.
still in, or did he get out? Or?
No, he's still in.
I mean, he won't right now. It's after you finish, I guess, so...
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you necessarily have to be out, but I don't think you can collect any time before you finish your contract, basically.
Okay.
Like, worked for my brother Josh, at least after he got out of 4 years in the infantry. But
Oh, okay. Huh, that makes sense. So you only have one liver or kidney.
well, I have one liver too, but also, yeah, only one kidney.
Really? You only
Yes.
have... Oh, well, yeah, that's true. You only have one liver. Everyone knows that. Everyone
that
only
might
has
be
one
an
liver.
issue.
But does that affect at all, like how alcohol hits you whatsoever?
It's a
And
great
also,
question.
how did
Well,
you get into the Marines with only one kidney?
Oh, you just lie your ass off.
Really?
Oh yeah. That is 100%. Well, the kicker is too. So basically, if you're honest, if you have anything wrong with you, you won't get it. Just at all. And so recruiters make sure you just lie.
So anything wrong?
Yeah,
Like,
anything wrong.
You broke your foot?
Except for maybe like glasses. But yeah, if you've like broken bones or stuff like that, or you have like a weird allergy, they're just gonna be like, no, fuck you, we'll get somebody else.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, that's crazy. So like, I fucking if you can tell, I broke my hand. This hand right here.
Mm-hmm.
Would this cause an issue to them? Would they say something about like this disfigurement on my right hand?
If you told them,
Well,
or
Well,
if
they-
you didn't told them, you can get away with a lot of shit.
so like if they didn't even like bother looking at my hands, like I just kind of covered it up the whole time. I wouldn't even have
You'd
to-
probably be fine. Honestly, like, I was really worried because you get an examination from a doctor, and I have a bunch of scars from, like, I had a surgery my junior year and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just, like, this 85-year-old white dude who was half blind, and he just, like, kind of like, oh, no, you're good. You're good to go, man.
So you
Yeah.
just have to lie your ass off.
Yeah, thanks to the HIP Act of 1969, I think, or something like that. Nobody can get your medical records unless you let them. So you just
Wow.
say you've never been to the doctor before in your life. Get a lot of weird looks when you do that, but they're like, yes, you say you've never been. Nope, not once.
Not once. I don't have any medical records at all. Never even gone for a checkup.
Not a single one.
Not even a physical.
Born in a farmhouse.
No, that's whack. I don't know if that should be. I feel like that would prohibit a lot of people, like a significant amount of people from being in the military who want to be in the military, and I feel like that would like highly affect their population.
Yeah.
The population of people in the military.
It definitely depends on what time you're looking at too, as far as what we're going through, on how much they want to push people through. Like post 9/11, right after that, you could get a waiver for anything.
Oh, well, that's fair.
Yeah, like there was crazy stuff going on where somebody would like pop for cocaine on a piss test, and they'd be like, "Fuck it, sign a waiver, and we'll just send you. We need people." That happens with snipes all the time. But anyways, yeah, then you get
Snipe? What?
snipers. Cocaine's apparently a big thing for snipers, but
Yeah, I'd fucking hope so, dude. They're sitting there and trying to.
that's the rumor I always hear. But
They're trying to stop their heart in a war zone. They're trying to make
Yeah.
it so their heart doesn't beat. Pull off the trigger. Oh, man, I could not imagine that. That is that's a bit fucked.
oh
That's-
yeah, It's-
Oh yeah.
yeah.
It's just the way of the road, I guess. It's just one thing you go through. Have you talked to Logan at all since he's been in the military or in the Marines?
Yeah, a little bit. I suppose I haven't talked to him a ton, but like when we were in training, or I was going through like different sections of our training, we're in California, we could see each other. Other than that, I haven't talked to him too much. He's, let's see, done with one deployment. He's got like 16 months left or something like that on his contract.
Okay. I know he hates it. I know he's
Yeah.
super. That kid was like the most gung ho kid about joining the Marines, like all throughout high school and middle school and even probably elementary school. I didn't know him then, but he just, every fucking time you talked to him about his future, it was like Marines. And like the last time I talked to him, I saw him like walking down the street, and I stopped and I gave him a hug, and I was like, "It's been a long time, man. Like, what have you been up to?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm in the Marines," and I was like, "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." And he's like,
Yeah.
"I fucking hate it. I hate every minute of it."
Yeah.
He just does not like it whatsoever.
It's especially dependent on the time you're in too. Like if you're in wartime, you really have that like Marine Corps mentality, what everybody pictures, like Marines look out for each other.
Jarhead mentality.
Yeah, I guess. But then you get into peacetime,
and then everyone starts eating crayons.
It's not just that. They just like they run out of money and they need to kick people out, so they start trying to kick people out for like super stupid, shitty things, and like then it just kind of becomes a game of like the people getting promoted aren't the people who should be getting promoted. They're like kind of the buddy fuckers who can play the game, and like
Buddy fuckers.
yeah, it's just a system, and then you go back into wartime and it corrects itself again, but it's kind of always swinging.
That's whack. That's super whack.
Yeah.
I almost joined the Air Force.
Much better choice.
College. That's what I heard. That's what everyone told me. They're like,
Oh,
you should
yes.
definitely. They're like,
Yes.
if you're at all smart, like join the Air Force. And I was like, well, I can kind of do algebra, so like I should join the Air Force.
See.
That's reasonable. So they discharged you from the military. What happened after that?
Let's see. Came back, started going to college, and then yeah, that's pretty much it. Started an internship this summer.
Hell yeah. Where do you go to school?
UMD.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what's your major?
Right now I'm going for an economics BBA with a minor in accounting.
Oh,
So- Econ coming through strong.
Econ coming through strong. Yeah, with
Shout
Prosen.
out, shout out Tim Prosen.
Oh yeah.
Shout out Prosen.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, try not to say full names on this podcast.
We can edit that out.
Sorry.
That's all right.
good.
Well, I'll mute your mic when we come to that time. I'll find that.
We'll
Maybe
do it
also
again.
don't, like,
Shout out Mr. Prosen.
Tag me in this
There we go.
because there might be some people who aren't very happy. But
Okay, I won't tag you in it. That's all right. Yeah. So you were on econ team
yeah, it was
And-
super fun.
in high school, and like from what I heard from like Max and Cade, you were just like this economic genius. Like you there was like only a set amount of like terminology and like information that's in economics, and like
Yeah.
you just like memorized all of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say the thing that I feel like is really cool about econ is it's no concept you ever run into will ever be new. It's something that just makes sense if you think about it logically, and then the rest is just learning names for it.
That's pretty simple actually. Like there's
Yeah,
it's kind of like engineering, there's only like so many like if you're doing an engineering problem, you can travel all the way back to like original physics equations. And if you work your way from those, you can eventually solve the problem. Like if you start at like the very base, like energy balance equation or just like the energy balance equation, like you can solve almost any single problem from that. As long as you have like a fundamental idea of how the equations work and stuff like that.
Yeah. I was going to say that that might be a little bit simpler for somebody in engineering.
That's true, yeah.
I don't know if I'd feel the same way if I tried, but
I know I talk about it to some people about like some of the things like we have to calculate and stuff like that.
yeah.
And I just explained to my dad because I leave the lights on all the time. It's just like a bad habit I have, like leaving a light on and then leaving the room. And there was one time I left the front yard light on for a whole week. A whole week.
Yeah.
And my dad came home and he was fucking pissed. He's like, my electric bill's going to be, $50 higher.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. And I figured out actually, so when it comes to like houses and stuff like that and just like light bulbs, everything that you pay for electricity in kilowatt hours, and all a kilowatt hour is just watt. Is like the amount of watts that light bulb, like if it's a 60 watt light bulb, it's taking up 60 watts. And then you multiply that by how many hours it has been on. And for a week, I can't remember how many hours it was. It was like 24 times 7, which is like, 24 times 7. It's like math is fucking
I was going to say
168. It's 168 hours.
Yeah.
And you just multiply that by 60 watts and then... divide by 1,000, and then that's how many kilowatt hours it is. And 1 kilowatt hour is like 10 or 15 cents. And so at the end of the day, I think I owed my dad like 20 cents. And so I took 2 dimes. I owed him like 18 cents. So I threw 2 dimes at him, and I said, keep the fucking change. And I've never seen a man more angry but more impressed in my entire life.
Yeah.
Because... It's things like that you learn that like most people don't think about. Like most people don't understand how much electricity a light bulb takes up and shit like that. So it's just it takes up most of your electricity?
Heat?
It's your water heater. Because like that thing is always running. Always running.
Yeah.
Constantly because the water has to be at a certain temp, so it's constantly like turning on and shutting off. And those things are like 1,100 kilowatts. Or like 100 kilowatts. Like if you get a small water heater, that's 100 kilowatts, and that's like if that runs for an hour, that's 100 kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
So it's just like absolutely ridiculous of like how expensive your water heater is. So that's like where a majority of your money is being spent on electricity. Is that?
Huh.
Yeah. So it was an odd tangent, but
Yeah.
I know that economics is like kind of difficult to like initially get into. Is it difficult to like stay in? Are there like really some abstract ideas when it comes to economics that like could really fuck somebody over if they're taking like a certain class or something?
It's a good question. I don't think so, I guess.
That's because you're an econ wizard, buddy. Come on.
I like econ, but actual econ concepts, I will say, are extremely easy. If there's anything that like throws it off or makes it difficult is people, because people are fucking stupid. if every human acted 100% rationally, things would be so much easier.
Oh,
like,
100%.
Here, I can give you an example of like people don't act rationally. So just as a baseline, if you could have $0 or $10, which one would you take?
$10.
Yeah. But then let's say, so we change. So now there's $100 on the table.
Okay.
And I get to decide how we divide it up. The only thing you get to decide is whether or not you take what I give you or you tear it up. And so let's say I say, I'm going to get $90, you get $10. Now your option is, are you either going to take that $10 or are you going to rip up the whole thing?
I'm going to take the $10 because I didn't have any and now I have $10. I don't care if you got 90. I want 10.
That's the rational way to think about it, but there's definitely a lot of people who'd be like, no, fuck you, dude. I'm just tearing up the whole thing.
What?
Yeah. But
so where'd you learn that?
I don't know. That's more like behavioral economics and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I guess not something I've got super into other than reading a few books. But yeah, I don't know. The baseline stuff's a lot easier.
So are you just doing like a general economics or macro or microeconomics or?
I'm not specializing there, but I am doing a bachelor's of business administration, which is a little bit more specific, and it's actually like an accredited program instead of like a bachelor's of arts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That's pretty whack. That's crazy. So why'd you go to UMD instead of like the U of M, where they have like a world-renowned like economics program?
Because it's way more expensive there.
Is it really?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Gabe can look it up, but I have no idea what the main U costs. But UMD
Oh,
caps at like
I'm sure it's
$12,500 a year.
Really? That's
yeah.
all UMD is?
Yeah, semester it's like 6,500, but you don't pay for anything more than like 13 credits. So I've been taking like 17 or 19 credits, and then averages out a lot nicer.
That does make a lot of sense because when D Langs went there, he was paying like I think like 20 grand, but he was living on campus.
Oof. Okay.
So he was like, yeah, this whole year is going to be about 20,000.
Yeah.
Man, I thought UMD was more expensive than that because that's like
Right.
that's like what I pay at NDSU. I pay like
Really?
Yeah, I pay like 12,000 a year.
Okay.
But I also live on campus, so maybe I pay. I don't know. All I know is like I have to pay a fuckload of fees. Like I have to pay like a $400 like lab fee
Yeah.
and like a $500 like access computer access fee and shit like that. It's honestly like such a fucking scam. It's like you
yes.
have every student paying this just so IT can get paid like and make way more money than they need. It's oh god.
Yeah.
At the end of the year, I overheard one of the IT interns that actually went to NDSU, and he was like such a genius that they like hired him too to be one of their IT guys.
Uh-huh.
And he was talking about like their budget at the end of the year, and he said that everyone got a brand new like $3,000 computer tower and 2 extra monitors. So everyone has 3 monitors now. Because at the end of the year they had like 50 grand in their budget and they needed to spend it all.
Yeah.
And they spent it. They bought all this shit from like Newegg into like December. Like it was like right before the year ended.
Yeah.
The financial year. God, it was crazy. So what's your internship? What are you doing right now?
I actually started as a financial planner with Northwestern Mutual. So, cut that. Maybe we don't say Northwestern Mutual. I was thinking about it too before I came on. And I was talking to some of my coworkers. I was like, yeah, can I like talk about stuff? They're like, oh, you have to call this like compliance officer down at like our home office in Milwaukee. Otherwise, you lose your license. So,
Ooh. Yeah, I don't.
maybe we won't get super into what that specific company does, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can say their name, I imagine. Like you can say the name of any company on a podcast as long as you're like talking about that company. Like
Okay,
you're not
gotcha.
talking specific. You're not like, yeah, I handled Jim's finances and we invested $1 million into a
Yeah.
hedge fund. Yeah, you're not.
That's a big no-no.
Yeah, you're not talking about that. No, that's some confidential shit. That's like doctor-patient confidentiality. But
I'd love some insider trading tips, though.
Ooh.
so
Maybe off air.
So you being an economics guy, what do you? What's your take on the politicians in January? Like almost every single politician that had something invested in the stock market pulled out almost all of their money in January before COVID actually hit the U.S.
Oh yeah, super
effect-
smart move.
Yeah, it was a smart move, but isn't that like the definition of insider trading?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have that much faith in politicians. So at that point, I'm like, yeah, what did you expect they were gonna do?
That's very true. I mean,
I don't know. Like if you look up, what is it, Nancy Pelosi, what she's earned in her salary, what she should have earned, and then what her actual net worth
no, just
is.
leave it on Levi.
Actually, yeah, if you want to look up what her net worth is, her salary should have only totaled up to like $4 million or something like that throughout her lifetime, but her net worth is like 15 times more than that. And you're like, well, yeah.
Well, I mean, even the fucking Clintons, when Bill Clinton was in office and Hillary and Bill were going around.
So like 120 million.
Okay, yeah.
120 million?
Yep.
Nancy Pelosi?
Yeah.
This is current members of the United States Congress by wealth. She's
Why is
the
Nancy-
third richest person in Congress?
Why is Nancy Pelosi? Why? That doesn't make any fucking sense.
Trade favors. The Clintons, if you want to get into fucking corrupt, the Clintons
yeah.
are the epitome of it.
Oh, 100%.
Like
They-
the fact that they
the
haven't ever
worst.
paid taxes. Okay, you want to hear the
What?
best way to avoid taxes ever? Is you set up a foundation in your name. So, like, you know how if you contribute to charity,
the Clinton Foundation?
if you contribute to charity, you get a write off whatever you contribute to it as like charitable donations, and then it reduces your tax liability. So they set up...
Wait, are you telling us how to not pay taxes?
Hypothetically, you'll get caught. The Clintons won't, because they'll just pay off people or
The
suicide
IRS
people.
comes after me for this, Levi. I'm coming after you.
Well, I can't guarantee you won't get audited, but yeah. So they set up the Clinton Foundation, which the money just goes to them, and then they donate money to their own foundation that then goes back to them, but it's technically a charitable donation, so they get to reduce their tax liability. Which is just like you're donating money to yourself and then calling it a charitable donation.
Dude, that's like money laundering, like straight up.
It isn't even good money laundering. That's the kicker. It's just blatant.
That is super blatant. That is so blatant.
Or like when they're going to make a decision about something or vote some way, like some foreign agency, some foreign government will like donate $3 million to them, and then they'll make a vote in that country's favor. And you're like, huh, I wonder if the fact that you just got paid $3 million by them had any influence on that. But
that is so crazy. That is so crazy. How about the Clintons? Have you ever heard about this? How when they went and did rallies all around the nation, when they were, I think it was when Bill Clinton was running for his second term, every rally that they went and did around the country, the Clinton Foundation collected $500,000 for every single rally. They did like 30 rallies.
yeah.
Like 30 plus rallies. That's like $15 million just unchecked straight into their bank account. And like they didn't even sell that many tickets. Like it showed at their highest selling like rally that they had that was indoors. People had to pay tickets for seats to get in there. They only made like 20 grand.
Yeah. Well, it's blatant money laundering.
It is.
Oh, I've got another great example, too, from the COVID thing, doing the stimulus bill, and then the Democrats trying to rewrite it and force all of these other random, like, charitable donations in there. Yeah, and so, like, a great example was the Kennedy Arts Center, something like that, I want to say. They made sure the Kennedy Arts Center got put in, and so the bill gave $25 million to the Kennedy Arts Center, who then still laid off employees, and then donated $5 million to the Democratic Party. And you're like, okay, how is that not money laundering? Like, you just gave them $25 million of taxpayer money, and then they gave $5 million to your political party, and then still laid off their employees, so they didn't even fix what they were supposed to do in the first place with the money. But
Wow. Jesus Christ. You understand this a lot better than I do. Do you understand, like, what happens at Wall Street at all? Do you know anything?
I kind of try to avoid that a little bit, I guess. I'm definitely into investments, but the stock market in particular, I'm just really not into because it's so much gambling. It's not... I shouldn't say it's not real science, real math, but it's not like stock prices aren't based on what something's actually worth. It's based on what people's perception of that is going to be worth. Right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's what I've heard it as explained as, but I can't even wrap my head around it.
Let's say Gabe starts a lemonade stand.
Yeah.
And he's doing good, but he wants to invest more money into the lemonade stand. And so he is trying to get investors. And so he gets, he sells off part of his company, and I buy that for like $5. And now on face value, that's worth $5. But now it moves to the secondary market, so we're trading it. Now, people are basing that off of whatever they think it's going to be worth in the future. So if I sell it to you and you think Gabe's going to do really well, so that stock is going to be worth more in the future, then you'll buy it for $6, even though I only bought it for $5. So it's a secondary market where it's not what is that company actually worth, it's what people think it's worth. And then you get into all this. I don't like the meta-analysis of like, I'm going to do this because I think they're going to think that I'm going to think that I'm going to think I'm going to do this. And I just don't like it. I don't know.
I wouldn't like that either. That sounds really fucky. So like one of the biggest comparisons that I've heard about like what actually happens like in the stock market, like the best explanation I've heard is like you're basically just moving money around. And somehow, like, people are making, like, more money. So, like, the highest paid person in, like, 1960 for a company, like, the highest paid employee for a company would typically be, like, an engineer or something like that. Like, they would be making the most money, or maybe, like, a financier or something like that. But that was pretty typical. Like, the person working for that company, an employee...
Yeah.
Who made the most money would be like an engineering manager.
Yeah, they have like an immediate value added to that company. They're physically doing work.
Yes.
You can say like, look at this, they're doing that.
Yes, but now it's, like people working in like Wall Street and who are essentially like they're basically just moving money in circles, like back and forth to other companies. Like they're selling stock and they're buying stock and they're just like trading all the time, and somehow they're making millions for these companies. And it's not like you make the most by manufacturing like a great product anymore. You make the most about like how much your company is technically valued at in the stock market.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a very rough understanding of what's going on. So
I don't like to get into it, but I feel like I wouldn't personally as a career, but it's not necessarily that they're just moving money around that does nothing, I guess. I don't know. Either way, when a company is selling stock, what that's doing is raising capital for that company to invest more in their future.
But that's essentially just moving money around.
Okay, but
that's
hear me out.
essentially that's the company, getting this money, and then they technically, they buy stock from another company, or they have their own stock or whatever the company's worth.
Yeah.
And then they sell that off. People give them money, and then they take that money, invest it back into their company, buying more stock of their own company and continuously selling that. So they're essentially taking money and just looping it back forward. And that's how it feels.
Not necessarily. I don't know. Okay, well, hear me out. Let's say you're starting a business. I always like to do really simple analogies. Obviously, it gets way more complex. Mm-hmm. But, let's say you're starting some basic company, mm-hmm. and you have the human capital, you have the experience, the knowledge, the connections to be able to do this, and that would add value to not only, your city and yourself, but, to the general GDP. You'd be producing something that benefits everybody, I guess, theoretically. I guess it's kind of a weird way. But, having that company would be a gain.
Okay.
But the thing is, you don't have the money for it. And so maybe you start something small and you want to be able to get bigger and do more, but you don't have that capital for it. Mm-hmm. And so if people invest and buy your stock, that mm-hmm. gives you that capital now to maybe be able to buy new machines, new buildings, hire more employees, and continue expanding that. And then in turn, you pay those people dividends.
Yep.
Based on what you're making.
Yeah, it's like Shark Tank. That's, they buy a certain percentage of your company for a certain amount of money, and then you pay them back plus interest.
I guess another weird thing is a company is actually never legally obligated to give dividends. You also get other things, like if you buy stock in a company, you get voting shares, and then you can mm-hmm. vote people into the board. They get they vote whoever's going to be the CEO, COO, CFO, stuff like that. So you can also kind of direct the company. But I don't know. It gets a lot more convoluted from there, but the base structure is actually beneficial. Mm-hmm. So if you think about you're investing in, or people who are investors start investing in a certain market that they think is going to blow up. Like maybe when fintech was just starting and stuff like that, they'd be like, okay, this is something that's going to help us, and we know it's going to help us, so we know they're going to grow. So we invest money in that. And then as a whole, those companies have more money to grow, technology progresses, everything like that. There obviously are situations where, it's people just moving money around, but the base structure is still obviously beneficial.
But what do the Wall Street people for companies do then? What exactly is their job? Is their job to find investors?
Like a stockbroker?
Essentially, yeah.
Broker the sale of stocks, I guess. Depending on just saying Wall Street in general, there's 100 million different things and little positions at different companies you can get. But I don't know. Obviously, there are examples of it going bad, like the subprime mortgage crisis, and mm-hmm. people just trying to shift money around to make things look good that are really horrible investments and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But as a whole, it's still, I don't know, it's still a good thing.
I guess, yeah. I mean, it seems like we're becoming more of a corporate. It seems like companies are becoming more corporate, and that's how they're making most of their money, rather than just pure I don't know. It's the same idea to go from a currency to from a trading system. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing to do, and it's purely for the advancement of the society as a whole. Is to if you go from this medium currency, you can buy anything you want rather than trying to trade corn for cows, right?
Yeah.
It's that same idea, and it creates an economy. But to go from purely you make most of your money from investors and manufacturing, mm-hmm. now it's you make a lot of your money by selling stock to smaller crowd-funded investors, essentially. not crowdfunded. That's a bad way to put it. But it just seems like companies are becoming more and more corporate rather than just being purely manufacturing and creating something physical.
That is a really good point, actually. Like, the fact that corporations exist is a whole other thing I like to, I guess, get into. But corporations, what amendment is it? 13th Amendment? I'm trying to think. 13th Amendment, I think that's where they draw their power from.
Look that shit up.
That basically says they can be a human, which, in my opinion, is absolutely absurd that a corporation can technically act as a human, because it shouldn't. And you run into all these other problems where...
Not the 13th.
Yep, that's the 13th. That is the one. And that's the kicker of why it's so weird and corrupt and misleading that's why...
So for those who are listening, the 13th Amendment is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for cum whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction.
I think it's probably in Section 2.
Yeah, look up, see what Section 2.
No, maybe not. Here, do a quick Google of what constitutional amendment. I think it's the 13th, but I thought there's more to it.
Okay.
But
I've also heard about that too with like bailouts and stuff like that. You can consider like a corporation as like a person, and that's why it's like legally okay to bail out a certain company.
That's a whole other... Bailouts are corrupt. It's anti-capitalism.
It really is anti-capitalist.
People things are... What do you call it?
Oh, it's 14th.
14th. Okay, there we go. Sorry. I was off by one.
That's all right. Yeah, no, that's really, really odd. But you were saying about 14th Amendment?
Oh, yeah. If you want to look up exactly what the 14th Amendment is, too, how corporations draw power from it is not at all what they were supposed to be doing. Like, originally how corporations operated is they'd go to the state government and say, we're forming a corporation for this specific purpose. Like, we're going to build these bridges, and this is why we need this power and rights for this limited amount of time. And then they accomplished that task, and then the corporation was dissolved. But now you just have this thing where corporations kind of live on forever, and you run into so many issues because they can technically...
Wait, the corporations were supposed to be dissolved?
Yeah, they were formed to accomplish a task, and then they were finished, and that was it. The corporation was dissolved.
That was originally.
Like, yep, you get a charter for like this period of time or this task you're accomplishing.
So that's kind of like the idea where we had those, where we created like the interstates, right? Because like the reason why, no, it wasn't interstates. It was something you could land a plane on like an interstate or something like that.
That definitely is a thing. I'm not super familiar with it.
Yeah, it is a thing. It was under
every so many miles or whatever on an interstate, there has to be a length of road that's straight or something like that.
Yeah, it has to be a length of road that you can land like a certain size plane on due to like just in case of like wartime if it became like a domestic thing. But that was essentially like a corporation because at the time prior to that they didn't have those roads, and where they did have those roads they had to like go in and like fuck with the roads completely and like change them up almost entirely, like take out where roads were and replace them with like new areas so they could have that strip of land within that, mile radius or whatever it was. So that was a corporation that did essentially dissolve itself because it was a federal thing.
Okay, yeah, that would have been a perfect example of like why you would have one.
Yeah.
You would have a charter of we're giving you these powers and rights for this amount of time or this task you're trying to accomplish, and this is why you need them. Get that done, and then you're done.
Then you're done.
Yeah, I don't know. You get all these weird things where corporations can kind of just do whatever they want. They can break as many laws as they want, screw people over, and then they just can kind of restructure and nobody really goes to prison. Like we've gotten better at that, I guess, in recent years as far as like, oh boy, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's some laws basically now where like a CEO is legally personally responsible for actions of the corporation. But kind of the phrase I always hear is the problem with corporations is they have no soul to save and no body to incarcerate. They're just this
idea.
Yeah, this limitless thing that kind of lives forever, that can do whatever it wants, and yeah.
That is true, because I've heard... So what exactly is a corporation compared to like a company or like an Like,
Yeah, so when you get incorporated as opposed to being like a sole proprietorship or an LLC, stuff like that, the corporation is technically considered its own entity. And so why a lot of people used to do that back in the days, like if you were a sole proprietorship, let's say you run a restaurant or something, somebody slips, falls, breaks their back, sues you, they can take your personal assets too. Once you incorporated, then that's like separate from you, I guess. It's its own separate entity.
so like a restaurant chain could become a corporation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've gotten better at that too, I guess. Less people are incorporating and more are going to like an LLC, which is like a limited liability corporation, which is a mix of the two. The owner still gets to like own it, but his personal assets are separate from his
Business assets.
Yeah.
Okay. That is such an abstract idea. That is so great. That's the thing when it comes to like economics and like business management and stuff like that. Like I know nothing about, and I imagine like a majority of the people like on the face of the earth know nothing about like business management, like how it works like within their own country, let alone in the US.
Yeah, and I was gonna say it. If it comes across like I know how it works, don't trust me. I don't. I just know like a tiny sliver more than most people.
Well,
But that's like the biggest thing when you learn about it is you learn. I'm like, wow, I actually have no idea how anything works. But
that's crazy that it's crazy that there's so many loopholes to like get around taxes and stuff like that.
yeah,
Like as a corporation, because like I know Apple doesn't have to pay California taxes even though their headquarters is in Silicon Valley. They don't have to pay California taxes. They pay like Chinese taxes because their actual like factories are in China. And I imagine
smarter way to do it.
yeah, that is, I guess. I imagine they only pay like taxes in their state for their paychecks for their, employees there. The people working at the actual headquarters, like I imagine that's the only state tax they pay.
Yeah, I really don't know exactly what they pay, but
Okay.
yeah, it just makes sense for any company to do what they have to pay the least amount of taxes.
It really
Nobody likes paying taxes.
No one does, and people think it's like a gross thing. People think like companies and corporations should have to pay like the maximum amount of taxes. But like at the same time, like if they did that, they would be spending like 50% of their entire profit on taxes. Like a shitload amount. Like if they actually went by like what people expect them to do, they would have to pay their state tax, their federal tax, their every single tax that's there.
Well, I mean, the average person pays like 33% of their income into taxes if you include federal, state, 6.4 for social, 1.45 for Medicare, all that. It usually adds up to like 33%.
But that's an individual person.
Yeah.
That's a person if you're single and you're under the age of like 40 or something like that, and you're not, if you're single and you don't have a kid. But if you have a family, like if you're married, you pay less, and if you have a kid, you pay significantly less. Because when you're married, you're joint, right? So you pay with your spouse. So you pay the same amount of taxes, but like to cut it down individually, it goes to like 20% per person or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not super familiar. I should be because I just went through this trying to back file taxes. But yeah, like depending on who you are, what you do, your head of the household, stuff like that, you get to write off different liabilities. Like I think the standard deduction is $12,000 something. At least it was in like 2018. So if you make like less than that, you don't pay any taxes. Your taxable income is only whatever you make above that and stuff. But
Okay. That's also with taxes, like why the fuck are they so hard? Like, why are taxes such a bitch to do?
so hard to do.
No, they're not hard. They're easy to do, but why are they such a pain in the ass?
Like, why are they so much?
Yeah.
Because it's theft.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, I mentioned bailouts earlier. What knowledge what can you enlighten us with bailouts?
Specifically, I don't have a lot, I guess, about like certain companies getting bailouts, but it's philosophically speaking, or economically, I guess not philosophically speaking, it goes directly against what capitalism is or should be. The federal government should never be propping up companies. It should be ensuring that there aren't monopolies and stuff like that. But instead, they're ensuring oligopolies and ensuring government-enforced monopolies and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like pharmacies are basically a fucking monopoly. in the United States of America. Like, they really are.
Huh.
They really are. So I was hanging out with a friend, and she is going to school for pharmacy. No, I don't fucking drink Reds. Ugh. I drink beer like a man.
Sorry, I'm a basic white girl.
So she worked at this pharmacy, and she was telling me she was telling me like she worked at the Costco pharmacy, and she's like, yeah, people come in and like they don't have like a Costco card or anything like that, and they can use our pharmacy, and they go there because it's like cheaper than most pharmacies, right?
Okay.
And she was telling me that they buy like big, like a protein size container filled with like Percocet, like hard, like, yeah, painkillers, like very expensive and like hard to make.
Well, it's only
painkillers.
expensive because of a patent, but
Yeah, it is. But they'll buy a bottle like that for like $50. And as like the average American, you can't buy a giant a barrel of Percocet for like $50. But they'll sell it. They'll buy a container like that, and they'll portion it out into smaller containers that they use for prescriptions. And then those prescriptions, each individual person will pay like $10 for like 20 pills or whatever it is. And that's really, really cheap for a pharmacy. They'll pay like $10 for 20 pills, but that bottle, that entire barrel that they fucking bought of Percocet had like 10,000 pills in it, and they're selling them 20 pills at $10 a pop.
yeah.
So they're just raking in money.
I am actually really curious about that as far as pharmacies. I don't know. I feel like you do run into a lot of issues with stuff like that because it's just such a highly regulated industry. You end up getting so much taxes. And we'll think, but to be a pharmacist, how long do you have to go to school?
8 years or 7 years or something like that.
Yeah, to sell the pills. And so then you have somebody like that doing something that you have all that education, all that expense for them. They're going to be making over $100,000 a year
Starting.
to do something that a minimum wage employee could probably do, realistically speaking, unless they're making like custom medication there in the, what you call it, in the shop.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but you just get so many different kind of hurdles you run into or red tape that it just ends up getting more and more and more and more expensive every time you run into it.
But even then, it's like, it's just the idea that like this pharmacy is making such a high percentage, because like most companies, like a pawn shop, for example, their like minimum that they want to make is a 30% profit on whatever they buy. So they like purchase an item for $50, they want to sell it for $80.
Yeah, I was going to say their profit margin probably ends up being a lot lower. Like they probably mark it up 30%, but if you count like their overhead of keeping the lights on, the property tax, paying for the mortgage and stuff like that, I can guarantee the profit margin is going to be way lower. Probably like
it is
3-5% or whatever.
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's how they function. That's why they have that rule of thumb of like 33% or whatever. But for a pharmacy, they're making like 500% profit. Close to like 1,000. We did the math, actually. She told me a specific number of ibuprofen that they buy, and that's like, or no, it's not ibuprofen. It was, is it Advil? I don't know. It's one of the one of the over the counter.
Acetaminophen, Tylenol,
something like that.
Yeah,
it's an over the counter medication, so like you can just walk up to a pharmacy, no prescription, and just outright purchase it. And like they were making like a 5,000% profit for like when you buy in bulk from like the manufacturer and then portion it out to these small pill bottles. You're making that much money.
It must be lower.
No,
okay, hold on. No.
Just strictly,
the markup, yes. I am really curious, though, where that money goes. The only reason I say it can't be a 5,000% profit margin is because everybody would do it, and there'd be way more pharmacies.
Well,
well, I'm curious if there's like what sort of restrictions you have to become a pharmacy and stuff like that.
Well, you have to be like necessary. You don't have to be sponsored by like a big company. Like you see like Walmart pharmacy and like Costco pharmacy. They have a pharmacy because they, well, at least in the state of North Dakota, which this is where this was taking place, somebody basically goes to that company and says, hey, I want to start a pharmacy at this Walmart. And then that Walmart invests, all this sort of money into that pharmacy. And then that pharmacy owner has to pay a certain amount of overhead to Walmart. It's
Yeah.
like having a store in the mall or something. You have to pay.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
You have to pay your property or whatever, your property value or whatever you're paying to rent
Yeah.
that business.
Uh-huh.
But like in like the state of North Dakota, like that Costco, 49% of it, that Costco pharmacy, 49% of that is owned by Costco, and then 51% is owned by the owner.
Okay.
So the owner gets to set the prices. Whereas
Yeah.
in Minnesota, the like Walmart pharmacy here in Cloquet, they can own as much of that pharmacy as they agree to with the owner.
Okay.
So they get to set. Walmart
Yeah.
gets to set the prices, and it seems like all the pharmacies kind of like work together on their idea of like how much they're going to sell this certain thing for.
It's called price setting, and it's illegal. But
Yes, it is very illegal, but they do it with cars, they do it with trucks.
ooh, cars is a whole other thing. That is
That's an oligopoly,
oligopoly.
oligopoly.
Like
yeah.
an oligarchy is when it's ruling a country. Oligopoly as far as like a.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know. I suppose I don't know exactly how cars work either, but there's like definite restrictions on. Like, you ever notice if you're gonna buy a new car, you can't just go to one place. You can't go to the car store and you can buy Hondas and Toyotas. I can't think of anything. And Ford. Like, you can't do everything at the same store. It'll be a Toyota dealer or something like that. And they have these weird, like, super strict rules on restrictions of like territory, where legally there can only be so many in that area, and this one can only operate there, and this one can only operate there. And yeah, cars and vehicles is the definition of an oligopoly because there's so few in the market.
Mm-hmm.
They realized really quick, it doesn't matter if I lower my price because everybody else is going to lower their price. And so maybe the price difference will be slight, but if you look at like Ford, Chevy, anything like that for relatively similar models, they're going to be borderline the exact same price because they don't want to compete on that, which is then where they always shift to compete on quality. So it'll be one will be like, oh, we have a steel bed. Then another one will be like, oh, we've got an aluminum bed. And then the other one will trash that. But you always do that and then never consider the actual price because similar models are so close, I guess.
So you could essentially, like, let's say Ford manufactures their truck, and each truck costs them $15,000 manufacture.
Yeah.
But Dodge manufactures the same exact truck for $10,000.
Uh-huh.
And it's more or less about the quality and less, or it's more about the quality and less about the price that they.
Yeah,
that they market
that's
at.
what the companies want to compete on. I mean, like, if you think about it, if, I don't know, lemonade's the first thing I was thinking. But if me and you both own a lemonade stand and we're on corners and we're looking at each other all day, really quickly would realize if I lower my price, he's going to lower to match it. That's something we would really quickly be like, I don't want to compete on. So it's not technically illegal because we never sat down and talked about it and be like, okay, we'll each charge $2. But maybe one of us would be like, oh, I've got fresh limes in it. And then the other person would be like, oh, I've got a watermelon flavored one now, or grapes or something like that. And then that's what you're competing on, not the price. And then you kind of keep people distracted and the price becomes irrelevant.
Well, I feel like price isn't irrelevant in that sort of industry, though. It's definitely not irrelevant because, like, the same idea is, like, you don't want to lose money. So you're not going to innovate your trucks that you're selling for $34,000. You're not going to invest another $10,000 into that and cut your profits down, right? So it's promoting like industry evolution. It's promoting like advancements, but it's also hindering advancements at the same time.
It definitely is, which is where it gets into, I don't know, true capitalism is so far off from what we actually do. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine when people are like, see something go wrong in the industry and they're like, oh, capitalism has failed us. Like, no, we stopped doing capitalism like 100 and some years ago. That is long gone.
Capitalism is long gone, for sure.
Yeah, but you just get all these weird restrictions and regulations. I'm trying to think of some good examples. Oh, the internet's a great example as far as like it's a government enforced monopoly. And so the U.S. has we have the worst and the most expensive internet for any first world nations because it's a government enforced monopoly. So like if you're going to switch your internet provider, do you have choices?
I do.
Really?
In this specific area, yeah.
That's cool. I don't. Where I live, I don't. You have one. And if you want internet, that's them. Other than you get like a satellite data plan, and that's just going to be way slower and worse.
It is.
But if you're going to get like data hardlined to your house, we have one option.
Well,
And
yeah.
that's because we're regionally split. And so the government specifically said this company can only operate in this area, and then this company can only operate in this area. And so then
The government said that?
Mhm.
What?
It's a weird transition. So like
Kind of
it's-
why we only have like Minnesota Power. And, like,
yeah,
that's
so
it.
utilities are another thing that's a government enforced monopoly that sometimes makes sense. Because basically
Well, the internet one. Let's stay on the internet one for a minute. Like I always thought the idea was just like, you know, CenturyLink has a fiber optic line here, but like, you know, MediaCom doesn't. That was always the idea I had. It was just like, you know, CenturyLink, you know, got here first, and MediaCom just hasn't made it here yet, and they haven't put their fiber optic line in yet. So the government actually said only CenturyLink can be in Cloquet, and MediaCom has to fuck off.
Yeah, so this
What?
is a really fascinating thing back, oh boy, I don't know, whatever it was when the internet was kind of starting to become a thing. Honestly, I don't know the year, 70, 80, 90, somewhere in there. And they tried to make a deal with the government. And they're like, okay, so basically, this is only a fad. We're spending all this money to put up the lines. just give us this. Just let us operate here. And it's actually best if I kind of explain the utility thing too, or go back to that.
Yeah, just explain them both.
So like water, electricity, stuff like
Sorry.
that.
You want to run to my car and grab my other jewel pad? Yeah, it's in my middle compartment. It should be, but here's my keys. All right, continue.
All right. Like water, electricity, stuff like that, it's considered essential for people to be alive. And so it's a situation that if it wasn't regulated, it would turn into a natural monopoly because it has
Gabe. It's like the middle console. You have to separate the top two things.
Okay.
There should be like a little handle. You can't just like pull it up. You actually have to like unclick them. So you'll figure it out. Jewel pods. But anyway, you were saying. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off like that.
No, it's all good. Yeah, so like a natural monopoly occurs in any industry where you have a really high startup cost and then a very low maintenance cost. So if you think about setting up electricity and stuff like that, it costs a ton to put the lines up, and then once they're up, your maintaining cost is really low.
Or like telephone towers.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like-
exactly.
Okay, so like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile.
And so once the once one company, for example, is set up, let's say General Electric, whatever, comes through your town, sets everybody up with electricity, nobody else is going to be able to compete with that because they set it up and now they're charging you decently high prices because they're trying to recoup their losses. And now some other company tries to come in and say, oh, we're going to try to undercut their prices. They can't because they still have to worry about those startup costs. Whereas that original company that's there can just keep their prices really, really, really low, run that other company out of business, and then jack their prices back up. That's what like Standard Oil did, for example. It was so big it could maintain losses, and so they're always willing to sacrifice immediate profit for a gain of the market share.
Or tobacco.
Yeah,
Same thing.
just like Amazon did. That's
Yeah, Amazon
is
did it
pretty
too.
brutal about that too. But
God, they fucking like raped every other like competitor that they have, and it wasn't like, and
And
it
they-
wasn't even like when they started selling everything. It was like in the industry where they had books too. They did it with audiobooks. Like every other audiobook company that was out there, they would. I remember here. It wasn't a documentary. It was like a short YouTube video I watched about it. But it was like Jeff Bezos had the idea to like undercut all the other audiobook sales because you would just download them to your phone or your iPod or whatever
Yeah.
it was at the time, or your computer, and he basically like would look at other companies and see like what other places are offering audiobooks, and like it just he basically just like started, you know, cutting his prices down
Yeah.
at the time and just making it really low and like sacrificing those immediate profits.
yeah, exactly. I don't know if you knew it, but their well, do you know their original name? The original thing Jeff Bezos wanted to name Amazon?
I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I know what you're talking about.
Relentless. That's what he wanted to name them. If you still, even now, if you go to relentless.com, it'll redirect you to Amazon. Yeah.
I've heard that. Yeah, that's really fucked up.
It's
Yeah.
actually awesome.
They are brutal though. Like for example, what's one? Diapers.com. There we go. Diapers.com used to sell diapers that were like cheap, stuff like that. It was just a good website. Amazon wanted that market share, and they wanted to run Diapers.com out of business, and so they bled. It was something like $200 million to run them out of business. So basically, like, they'd put ads on Diapers.com that was like, click here and we'll give you free diapers for a year. And like just ridiculous deals where you're like, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. And they bled. It was something over like $200 million just to run that company out of business. And that's been their philosophy for just everything. They're brutal.
I mean, that's why he's 100.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
He's 147 billion. He's worth 147 billion dollars.
And then the kicker is now they're so big, if you want to sell something online, you pretty much have to go on Amazon. But kind of another funny thing is if you sell your product on Amazon and it does well, they will cut you out and then buy whatever you're selling directly from the manufacturer and make sure that they undercut your prices until they run you out of business.
That was one of the biggest things because there's this kid that's in my fraternity, and I don't want to shout him out because he told me not to talk about him, but I'm going to talk about what happened. So he actually, in high school, he started selling bat houses, which are exactly what you think they are. They're where you put your baseball bats. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, bats and mosquitoes, good all around.
Yeah, they're basically bird houses for bats.
Yeah.
And people put them like around their storage facilities or whatever it is, and they'll put like bat houses around there all the time, so bats stay the fuck out of their like garages.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah.
Or industries like that, and they'll like set them up in trees nearby, so like bats go there and they sleep at night, and like each one's like probably about half the size of this table. It can hold like 50 bats or something, like a ridiculous amount. And they're just essentially like little bird houses for bats, and people purchase them like all the time, especially in the summer. It's a big thing.
Yeah.
For a lot of like places that have like big warehouses and stuff like that, they don't want bats in there, so they'll set up bat houses around it to keep the bats out. And so he started selling these bat houses, and like his senior year of high school, he made like 60 grand. Like he made like 60 grand gross. That wasn't like his complete profit. He had to pay back. He had to buy it all stuff. But he went through the manufacturer, through him, and he would sell them on Amazon. So he worked really, really hard to get like a really good Amazon approval rating, so you can buy the bat houses off of there now. And he did it with a couple other products that didn't work that well, but like bat houses were the number one thing that sold for him. And what happened was Amazon started going through the same manufacturer because the manufacturer contacted him about it because he's the biggest salesman for that manufacturer of bat houses.
Yeah.
They contacted him and said, hey, Amazon's doing this. Amazon was buying their houses for more money. So they would sell each bat house, I think, like, I don't know exactly what, but I'm going to say $20.
Yeah.
They'd sell each bat house for $20. He would upcharge it to like 30 or 40.
Yeah.
And he would do that. Amazon was buying those bat houses for like $30 and selling them for like $32. So they would buy it for more money and sell it for less. And they started undercutting him severely. And his I think this year, he lost out on like 50 grand for what he was expecting to make.
Yeah.
They just undercutted him like fucking crazy.
Amazon is brutal.
And that's such a small
Bezos
niche.
is kind of a crack. What the hell?
It's such a small niche part of that company. Like,
yeah. Well, if you look up even some of their bigger departments, like their clothing line, that entire department, I want to say, hasn't been solvent or is borderline barely solvent and has been for years. Like, they're not making any money off of that. They just expand it into this all-encompassing kind of place to buy things where if you're going to buy something, you buy it from Amazon.
Yeah.
And they just have constantly, for the entire lifetime of the corporation, have been willing to sacrifice that immediate profit for a gain in market share. And I mean, I'm kind of torn because I'm on two sides. As somebody who lives in the U.S., that's horrible. But as far as like a businessman, awesome tactic. It really is.
I mean, you're at that point, you just got so much money, you can just knock around whoever it is. It's like the oil company with the hydrogen cars. They I think it was Chevy that created like the first hydrogen capable road.
The ones that like explode if you get in a fender bender.
I don't think they explode anymore, but I think they were actually like legitimate cars, and they were going to like release them to the market, and they were going to start opening up like hydrogen pumps at gas stations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the oil company sued Chevy so much. The oil company lost like $150 million, and Chevy ended up losing like $50 million. So the oil company lost like three times the amount of money that Chevy lost, and Chevy had to end up like stopping the production of hydrogen vehicles. And
Yeah.
it's how like the oil companies and petroleum, like they stay the most powerful, is they just bleed those companies out.
Yeah, and
Just
I
take
feel
them
like
by the balls and squeeze them.
it is really weird too, especially coming into like our generation and millennials, because we have had such a different impression of it, or I guess life experience. Like most of us were never alive in like I think it was the 70s, either 70s or 80s, when the base OPEC, which is literally by definition a cartel, could just stop us from having like we've never had that experience where we tried to line up to the gas station and there just isn't gas anymore. And we had such a strong experience of that back in the day. That's kind of where we've continued and where our country has gone from there on, because we were kind of like, we were OPEC's bitch. We don't want
We're OPEC's bitch.
we don't want to do this anymore, which is how I don't know, I guess how we've continued so far, which it's just a weird cross section because it's something we've never experienced or seen. But
Yeah, and I mean, even people growing up, like my dad grew up in a totally different world than we're growing. Like he didn't grow up with like Walmart. My dad grew up with like small mom and pop shops like around Esco and Cloquet that he would have to go to get his shit. And that's like why my grandparents owned Central Sales and Esco and Duluth, and they made like, they sold a bunch of odds and ends, trinkets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's why they did so fucking well. They did so well in that aspect because, where else would you get like a lights, or where else would you get like a caster or something like that, like a little caster wheel or something like that. Like you could go there and get it, but now you can get it at like Home Depot or Lowe's or Walmart, or fucking Amazon now. Like you couldn't do that back in the day, so everything was like locally owned.
Yeah.
And there wasn't like a ton of the only really total corporate businesses were like food businesses at the time, like McDonald's and Wendy's, Burger King, that kind of thing. So it just like this whole aspect of like going to superstores is still new, and now we have like
even superstores are becoming obsolete at this point.
Yeah, that's crazy how fast it came. Like even Walmart's taking a massive hit, and they have to sell a bunch of their shit on Amazon and on the Walmart website.
The rate of growth is exponential.
It is.
What is it? As far as like technology goes, that's Moore's law. It's like every 18 months. Every 18 months it doubles. There we go. Something like that.
Every 18 months, what doubles?
The effectiveness of technology, or the kind of expression I always hear is every 18 months you can get something for the same price that's twice as good. Or you can get something that's just as good for half the price. But it's an interesting time.
It really is. I think oh god, it's so scary for us as a generation. Like if you look at like what we're going to have to deal with, it's going to become far more like corporate and far more like reliant on the internet. Like we're already so reliant on the internet that we're teaching, classes, and like almost 100% of education from March until May was online. Like Zoom and Google Meets or Google Hangouts and stuff like that. Like they took over, and they had to. They successfully just like made, public schools obsolete. Like the buildings, they became obsolete for those 2 months because teachers didn't have to go to the school anymore. They could teach from home. The students could learn from home. Like they're finding out with businesses too, like they don't need office buildings really anymore, because somebody can do their entire job from a computer and then, do all their meetings from their house. Why even have an office building? You literally just need like a production floor at this point.
Yeah. I don't know. I do think like some parts obviously are scary, but that's, I don't know, in my opinion, that's more just kind of change in general, especially rapid change is always scary. And obviously there's going to be some things that don't go well, some things that do go well. But I also think it's a really exciting time to be alive.
It is.
I mean, if you think about not only the technologies that we have to solve problems we had in the past that we never could have dreamed of we could solve now, how fast things are progressing. Obviously scary because you don't know what's going to happen, but it's cool to see the problems that we had in the past aren't going to be problems anymore because we have technology to solve them. And then with that, you have the knowledge of how fast we're growing, that the problems we have today aren't going to be problems in the future because we're going to be able to develop the technologies to solve them. And obviously there's weird mixes in there too of like, obviously Amazon becoming a fucking giant is not cool, but like there's bad things in growing pains obviously, but I don't know. I do think also it's a really exciting time.
It really is. And I mean, that's always, like, you had that same outlook on, like, the human race dealing with, like, global warming and shit like that. You had that same idea, like, we're advancing at such a fast rate, like, when it comes to the time, you know, when they said, like, the Earth is going to end in 8 years or whatever, or we're going to run out of oil in 8 years, we created fracking. Like, we figured out how to frack so we can actually get into, like, the Bakken oil well and, like...
And look how,
all
how
the
great fracking turned out.
Well, I mean, fracking's pretty good.
It is.
It's a huge technological advance. It's a massive technological advancement for, like, every single oil well drilling company.
Like natural gases, natural oils, yeah, it's awesome. But, like, environmentally, fracking's not very good.
It's better than traditional drilling.
It is.
So that whole light your water on fire and stuff like that, there's literally been, like...
over-exaggeration to a certain extent, but, like, it doesn't... I'm not saying everywhere that's had fracking, like, has stuff like that, but I can't even remember. I did something about this for some stupid forced science project, and I don't know. Fracking's not great. It's just the stuff that, like, the fluid they use is, like, toxic nastiness. It's gross.
Well, it's just water.
Like chemicals and other stuff.
It's just proppants,
salt. Yeah, it's
stuff
just,
like that. A little bit of soap.
It's essentially like water and sand, and then like soap, so the oil and like stick to it.
Little nastier, but essentially.
I mean, with the company that I worked for, they made a tiny little skid that could attach to any of the other skids that we manufactured. You know, the oil, the salt water, and the natural gas separation skids. They actually had a skid that would take the salt water that's separated from the mulch that would come up and pump it back down into the well to keep the pressure. So they would have like two fracking wells essentially into one oil well.
Okay, yeah.
And they would pump salt water through the back of it to keep like the pressure going. So they would just take the salt water that they pulled up and then pump it back down in. Like, they wouldn't, you know, mix it with anything else. They would just pump it right back in. But I guess that's a little different than actual, like, fracking chemicals. But yeah, you were saying before we even started the podcast with, like, the wells and stuff, there was only, like, 2 cases? Or
Okay, so that whole lighting your water on fire, there was actually very few cases very early on of wells that miscalculated what they were doing. And basically... I don't know. Well, I don't want to give a general overview of fracking, but basically they just ran into problems where they misestimated how far the fracking would go, and it got into the aquifer. Obviously, that was horrible, bad. Happened very few times though, and ever since then, it just became such a. Logically, it just wasn't considered. I don't know. It became like a political and an emotional thing. And then it just didn't come into, nobody considered, no, I'm good. Quit a while ago.
Okay.
Rationally and stuff like that, it just wasn't a problem anymore. It was like, oh, I believe this, and now I'm going to go out and find facts to see why I think it's bad. Instead of somebody just rationally looking at what actually are the facts, is it bad, is it good, and stuff like that.
Like, the oil companies didn't even really get the chance to say, like, hey, we fucked up on that, but we fixed it now. They didn't even really get to say that chance before everyone jumped on the bandwagon of, like, fracking is bad.
They probably wouldn't. I'm definitely not saying the oil corporations didn't do sketchy things, but as, like, a technology and stuff like that, there definitely is a medium ground, and I feel like nobody ever finds the medium ground. People are either...
What do you mean by, like, a medium ground?
People are just so polarized by different things like fracking. Nobody can accept, like, okay, it's a good technology, but a couple of bad things happen. Maybe we don't trust this company, but it's still okay. People either go so far one direction that it's always good, always, no matter what. The corporations are super good too, or it's never good ever and stuff like that.
It becomes political.
Yeah, exactly. And it just polarizes everybody who tries to talk about it and think about it. And like, when you really get down to it, of like, you talk to somebody who's super against it, like, why are you against it? It's usually, it didn't start with, oh, it was these facts about it. It's, oh, this political party or social group I'm affiliated with was against it. And then it went out and found facts that proved I was right.
Prove its own bias.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does. I feel like that happens everywhere, though. Like, that's for anything.
Oh, yeah, it definitely does.
And it's just like, you know, you got to look at things logically. You got to look at anything, like any and everything logically. Like, there's no black and white. There's really no black and white thing on the face of the earth. Like, nothing is black and white.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so nothing at all is black and white, and like to find that middle ground, it's so important. But it's not like that's not something it should be taught, right?
Yeah.
I feel like there should be a class like logical reasoning, like that everyone has to take their freshman year of high school, where it just tells them like, hey, look at all the facts first, do your own fucking research, don't rely on what someone else said, and once you find all the facts in your, you know, for you, try and find a common middle ground. And that's like no longer the case. I don't think it ever was.
I mean, maybe
fracking is
hypothetically.
bad though. I'm just gonna put my foot down here. It can be debated like, either way. Like, it's not good. It's not just like water. They put in like they pump like different chemicals in like to break up the shale and all that other crap, and they just like leave it in open pits. And just like pipelines and stuff, fracking is also responsible for like a lot of water pollution and like destruction of wells. And you were talking about that earlier, I think.
Yeah, so there is one that is definitely horrible. I don't know if you can find it when you look it up, but it's the Halliburton Exclusion Act, I think. I think that's what it's called if you look it up.
Halliburton Exclusion Act.
So basically,
Pull up the
every
second tab
single
in
other
Google.
company in the world needs to say what's in that. They need to tell you what they're pumping into the ground, what's coming up, stuff like that. Yeah, Halliburton Exclusion Act, I think.
Oops.
Okay, yep, I was right. It is Halliburton.
Okay.
So basically,
It's called the Halliburton loophole, though.
every other company, when they pump stuff into the ground, they need to tell them, they need to make it public knowledge what's in that. Halliburton Exclusion Act is from some fucking political magic of paying off the right people. The Halliburton company specifically doesn't need to tell anybody what's in it, which is super corrupt. But
Which is super fucked.
Well, that's what I'm
Well,
saying.
yeah,
it's just
it's-
like it's
um,
regulated and not super regulated. Like, they don't have to tell you exactly what they're using and like the fracking juice, what they're pumping in.
everybody
fracking
but
juice.
Halliburton does.
The
Which
forbidden fracking
from
juice.
from what I saw, at least in the years in high school where me and Jacob were looking up stuff about it and doing like a spectroanalysis, what they pump in really isn't an issue most of the time. The more dangerous, not necessarily dangerous, but the more detrimental stuff to the environment is what they bring up. Whether it's like heavy metals or different minerals that cause different reactions and stuff like that, that just we're supposed to be really far underground.
Oh yeah, and there's even
But,
like for the company that I worked for, they have like a valve where they basically just like whatever is left over that typically stays with the salt water, like they
Yeah,
try
that
to
sludge.
yeah the sludge.
Yep.
They just like they try and purify the oil and the natural gas as much as possible because that shit's profitable. But like
Yeah.
the sludge left over, like there were a lot of wells like Hess and XTO both. Had a valve where you could just open it and it would just spurt it all over the fucking ground. They would just spray it like on the ground wherever that was, or they could hook a hose to it and like dump it in a pit. And that was like, I was like, that's pretty fucked up because that's like bad shit coming up that they're just pouring into this well and that they're gonna pour concrete over like eventually.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like it becomes more of a question of how concentrated it is and how long it's going to be detrimental, how much, and how they deal with it.
But I feel like there should be some sort of like recycling process for that, or
That's what I did.
yeah, that is what you did.
yeah, that
Talk
was-
about that a little bit.
Yeah, so anyways, back in high school, me and Schmitty are...
I gotta go take a piss, so go ahead and talk to Gabe about that.
Real close. Basically, our goal, or not necessarily our goal, kind of our engineering goal, was to try to find a environmentally safe way to recycle or get rid of that sludge that comes back, which was like the kind of the leftover product of whatever's there. And it's kind of funny too when you really do look at like recycling and cleaning processes and stuff like that. If there isn't a lot, but it's going to be there for a long time, that's okay because it takes up very small areas. Which is where I'm curious if covering it with concrete would actually be a good option. I think there might be a little too much for that, but it's kind of the solution me and Jacob came up with is because it's such a high salt concentration in that sludge. At least I'm trying to think. It was from North Dakota. It was literally one of those open pits we got. We had a professor from a unnamed college who went there for us and just grabbed a gallon of it out of an open pit for us, and that's what we worked with as far as doing like a spectroanalysis to find out what's actually in it, because at that time it was proprietary information. And then that's what we tested, and it was actually kind of funny. Our solution ended up being that we use it as road salt. To quote WLSSD, the solution to pollution is dilution. And so if you just take something that's bad but you spread it out enough, it's okay. And it's kind of funny too, actually. Well, just talking about what was in that fracking salt solution we got back, it actually wasn't stuff that killed stuff. That was actually the issue. It had a lot of, what was it? I believe it was like magnesium. Oof, I can't remember the second 2 or 3. Maybe it was like phosphate, something like that, but it wouldn't quote me on it. And basically they ended up being fertilizers. And so they helped stuff grow, which was super absurd. But yeah, that was honestly the biggest issue we ran into, was it helping too many things grow than actually killing stuff. But
So I feel like using that as a road salt would be, I mean, you probably have like fucking dandelions and like algae sprouting up through the streets, and
I would, probably have somebody who's like an environmental science major do a project instead of a couple of high schoolers first. But, maybe a little more official and more accurate. But
wasn't like I remember you telling the story like you were at science fair, and like kind of like the end quote that you guys had at like regionals was the fact that like, yeah, fracking in all in all, fracking really isn't that bad. And like every single science judge and like all the other people were like, nope. Like they were like, fuck that idea. Like fracking's terrible.
It definitely is really funny when you get into so far into academia where people are not necessarily concerned with, I don't know. It just gets into a weird thing. Because if you get too far business side related in the sciences, people are like, the business is good no matter what. But yeah, definitely in science fair and stuff like that, it's strange seeing how much emotions people have wrapped into what should be logical things that they're thinking about and considering the evidence, but they won't consider the evidence unless it aligns with their
beliefs.
Yeah,
their
exactly.
Ideals. That was one of the bigger things that we saw. That there was a girl at state science fair, actually. I can't remember if it was like sophomore or freshman year.
Yeah.
She grew a lung, actually. Grew a legitimate lung from like a rat lung. Grew like a section of lung that you could like replace in like a human body or something like that. That would attach to like the person and grow with it.
Yeah.
So you could eventually like replace someone's lung.
Gene
like,
splicing?
Kinda.
Okay.
It wasn't necessarily like that, but
yeah.
I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was something like super political with the idea. Like, she said something about like if you were to take like fetus stem cells and attach it to it, then it would have a better chance of like attaching to the human tissue.
Okay.
And like a lot of people were very off-put by that idea. They were like,
so
we don't like that.
That's where you get into like stem cells that can grow into anything. You get into fetal and embryonic stem cells, which where it gets really sketchy is it's not just something like, I don't know. I guess that really would almost borderline be getting into like the abortion debate, but when do you consider a kid a kid? When do you consider them an actual person? And those stem cells that you can grow into anything are ones that would be an embryonic stem cell, so it's already a sperm and an egg, and if you just didn't touch it, that's gonna be a kid. Which is where it gets into the really sketchy area then, where if you talk about you're harvesting them to do things like this, you're harvesting embryonic stem cells, I don't know, once again, whether or not you think it's a baby or not, but you're getting what could be a baby or what is a baby to that point and growing them and then harvesting their organs, kind of.
Yeah, they don't really do that anymore. They use the umbilical cord stem.
Those aren't as good, though. That's the difference.
No.
between...
They're better. Umbilical cord stem cells, they are much better because they're created by like a human
I'm thinking
being.
of the spine ones. Because I was going to say, that's
no.
the embryonic versus... Crap, what was the other one I said?
Embryonic versus fetal stem cells or something like that.
Maybe it's something like that. There is definitely a difference there.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, that's, I feel like, why that's always such a charged issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like stem cells now, there's really like no debate amongst like which ones are good to use, because if you use like an embryonic stem cell, a stem cell that came from like a baby or a fetus, for example, using those stem cells, you actually have to like process the stem cells so they can attach to like a human host. Yeah. You have to like go through this massive ass process where if you were to just basically take an umbilical cord and grind up the umbilical cord, and at that point it's just like purely human stem cells.
Yeah.
They're just blank adult cells that you attach to, or that you...
Yeah, I was going to say it's not just blank, but it has the potential to grow into anything, which is why you need to take them when they're that young, because it's a cell that can grow into anything. Yeah. It's going to multiply and has that DNA where it can turn into a heart, a lung, muscle tissue, brain matter, anything like that.
But I'm pretty sure embryonic ones, like, they're already pre-programmed to make like
a specific
baby.
Organ or something like that.
Yeah, they're already pre-programmed to be to grow a fetus into a child, into a baby.
Yeah,
that it will eventually, be born. But that's why it's like so hard, because you have to process them as like adult stem cells, and you have to go through like a whole process with that. Where if you just take the umbilical cord, it's already stem cells.
Yeah, I was gonna say
that are capable of hosting an adult.
Yeah, I was gonna say I knew you could harvest them from adults. Something about doing like a spinal tap or something like that. I never got super into it, I guess, as far as my knowledge about it. But I'd always heard it was something about it. It wasn't effective, or it definitely wasn't as effective. It had kind of passed that stage of being able to turn into anything.
Yep.
A really interesting one, though, is DNA splicing, because then taking organs from a similar animal that should be able to operate in a human, but you have little different issues. So if you splice human genome into a pig, is always the big one, because genetically they're so similar, you create a pig-human hybrid, and then you can harvest their lungs and heart and organs and stuff like that. Once again, that's getting into a sketchy area, because people don't feel like
Honey Boo Boo needs a new heart, so we're going out to the ranch to pick out a hog.
Yeah. I would run take a piss too. But.
Yeah, go take a piss. That's such a weird idea, is like the gene splicing and stuff, like DNA splicing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my god, that is such a weird subject. Like, literally, like, combining human DNA with like some sort of animal, like a pig, like you said, because they're so similar, and just harvesting those organs.
I can see how people are like it's such like a gray area to decide, like, when it gets too, I guess that's kind of what he means, like when it gets too weird, like when we're messing too much with humans, like trying to breed and like trying to decide, like, ethics of this stuff is always interesting to me. That's always what I get wrapped up in the most. Like, yeah, it's super cool. Like, we can like grow like organs, and like we're making all these kind of crazy advancements. But
well, even in like China, I know China. It was either China or Japan that like successfully altered the DNA of a child that was going to be born to keep it from having like certain diseases.
Yeah, like, kind of birth defects.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch like that like the movie Gattaca?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like exactly what it is. Like too, like,
yeah, like how
talking like the ethics of the point where like, is it like natural, like
it's not
genetic like superiority kind of that came out of it. Like, once you can look and see like, okay, so your egg and your sperm are to come together, and like here's all the possible birth defects, so like you can like getting all that information and like being able to like build like assemble like the perfect person, essentially. Yeah,
that is, yeah, and that's what, like, essentially what those like space rangers were or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? Like
because he's
trying to get into the space program.
Yeah, like all the space rangers were like perfect genetic human beings. Like,
yeah, you had to fake all that stuff because he wasn't made like they were or something.
Yeah,
crazy.
Honey Boo Boo needs a new heart, so we're going out to the ranch to pick out a hog.
That one, I want that one. It gave me the evil eye.
Honey Boo Boo, Honey Boo Boo, what are you gonna tell the judges when they ask you about your pig heart? My heart's sweeter than bacon, child. God, that's so fucking weird.
Speaking of South Park, they just took that off Hulu.
They just took South Park off Hulu.
Yeah, as of today, I was so sad.
Yeah, I tried.
I heard nothing. I literally would have binged like every single episode twice by now if I. Yeah, I would have if I had known it was going off. Like I saw that yesterday when I was cooking up with John, and it's just like, what? Oh, where's it going? Is Comedy Central have like their own app now?
No. You can watch it on Comedy Central's app. You can like watch it on their app, and I'm pretty sure you have to pay like a monthly fee to do it. Yeah, but you can watch like anything on Comedy Central. It's like their own streaming service, but it's kind of fucked in that aspect where like they went to HBO Max. They went to HBO Max instead of Hulu.
HBO Max.
Yeah, so I'm dropping Hulu today. Like after this podcast, I'm gonna cancel my Hulu subscription and pick up an HBO Max one.
Shout out HBO Max, I guess. That's a smart move. Yeah.
I mean, it really was, because South Park was like, it had a gigantic audience on Hulu, and this happened in like 2019. They made this deal. Like this has been. I looked it up because I was browsing on Hulu. And it said exp.7 days. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I was like, does that mean it's expiring in 7 days? Like, is South Park donezo? And I did like a bunch of research, and I eventually found an article from like 2019, like June 2019. And they said like in a year, South Park is going to be dropping from Hulu and going to Netflix, or going to HBO Max.
It's like the same thing with like the Office deal. Like I remember hearing about that in like 2019 or whatever. They had finalized... because like Netflix was just running out of like the Office's like contract or their extension on it or whatever, and like they went to like the highest bidder or whatever. Netflix wouldn't put down money. I think they decided to keep Friends over in the Office or something.
Ugh.
I think
also
Friends
a big cult following. Oh, it is?
Friends is definitely off of Netflix.
Oh well, everything. Maybe Netflix is gonna be obsolete. Some of the originals are good, but like they lost like all the good like mainstream kind of like shows.
I feel like you just have to switch it up a little bit. Like me and my brother, everything. One of us does HBO, or not HBO. One of us does Hulu. One of us does Netflix.
And you just share.
Yeah, if you stay on one for a couple of months and then go back to the other one, you're gonna find stuff you didn't see before.
For sure, and like Hulu added a bunch of new shit. And Netflix is huge for documentaries. Like Netflix has like a monopoly on like documentaries and like comedy specials.
And Netflix has a ton of good docs too. Like I just keep
so many stand-ups.
What?
They funded so many stand-ups.
Oh yeah, well that was because like they created their own like subsection of Netflix called Netflix is a Joke, and like they funded like. The only big comedian that hasn't been funded by Netflix recently is like Jim Gaffigan. And that was because he like took a shot in the dark with like Amazon. And it like did good. His last special did really good. I watched it on Amazon and it was fucking hilarious, but it was just like kind of crazy. He's like, yeah, I was going to go through Netflix and they offered more money, but I was like, I'll take a shot in the dark with Prime.
Yeah, I guess you gotta take some risks.
Why not? Yeah, but we mentioned the fact that there's this episode of South Park where Honey Boo Boo has her like fourth heart attack or something like that, and she needs another heart, and so she goes and gets like a pig heart from this ranch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So and then she's like, Honey Boo Boo, what are you gonna tell the judges when they ask about your heart? And she's like, I'm gonna tell them my heart is sweeter than bacon, child.
Oh my god. Did you ever see that thing of Dr. Phil was talking about having like the Honey Boo Boo family on Family Feud one time?
Oh no, it's not Dr. Phil. It was Steve Harvey.
Oh yeah. There we go. That they had to stop it. And one of them's like, "I need a bowl of corn to continue."
He like straight up was telling Jimmy Kimmel, he's like, "You don't have any friends. You don't know nobody like this family." Like it was crazy. We were 40 minutes delayed because somebody on the Honey Boo Boo family needed a bowl of corn to continue. He's like, "I understand if you need a shot of Hennessy. I understand if you need a shot of alcohol to like get you through the episode, but we're filming 6 of these a day." Like he's like, I've never heard anybody. He's like, why do you need a bowl of corn so bad? Like, who is hankering for that bad for a bowl of corn? They can't, answer questions.
Sometimes.
Bowl of corn.
Stop production. I need corn or I won't continue.
You can't even digest corn. What the fuck? Well, you can digest corn. You just can't digest like broken up corn, or you can't digest like non-broken up corn pieces.
Your nutritional value from it is not a lot.
No, it's not. It really isn't.
The more you know.
I saw an article one time about like how like almost all the food that we eat today, like farmed food, is genetically altered in some way to produce like the most amount.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like,
Or just like the most aesthetically pleasing.
No, it's not most aesthetically pleasing. It's the most like nutritional value from it. So like corn.
That's not true. It's the biggest. So the company can make the biggest profit.
Yeah, that's what it is. But like corn, like original wild grown corn, is like a small piece, not even about like 3 inches long, that you can't even like get like the little things off of. So you just have to eat the whole cob.
So like,
and it depends on what type. That's the other thing.
It also depends on the type too.
50 million different kinds of corn, whereas now all of our vegetables, stuff like that, everything is just one unified.
It really is.
Monoculture. There we go. That's what it's called, which is not a good system. But
no, it isn't, especially like mono farming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's you need to diversify. But yeah, on that subject of like genetically altered food, do you think genetically altered food is like a bad thing?
Okay. So a couple of big things.
Genetic GMOs, that's what it is. Genetically modified organisms.
Do I think that genetically altering food is bad? No. I don't think it's something about the process is unethical or it creates bad results. No, I don't think that is a problem. What I do think is a huge problem is how corporations and companies have used it. And this kind of goes back, but into like
economics and shit.
Yeah, the patent system that we have around it is so fucked up. Like originally, you couldn't patent life. That was the idea, is you shouldn't be able to patent life. But then as these companies kind of started doing stuff, like Monsanto is a big one that everybody at Monsanto should be lynched and quartered, but
tarred and feathered. Let's do it. Start tarring
out
and
of town on a rail. I think we should go back to that. But
that's like the worst torture tactic. Besides,
I think drawn and quartered might be like that's when you're getting pulled apart by horses, right?
I can think of right now, but
there's not much worse, dude.
No, there's a lot.
Oh yeah, like the Vikings, how they used to
Bloody Eagle,
the Bloody Eagle, where they rip your rib cage,
the old lungs out.
Yeah, rip your rib cage open and then pull all your organs and let it just hang.
But yeah, basically what ended up happening is all these companies were investing in genetically modifying organisms. And then they'd put so much money into it, they're like, well, I should be able to patent this. Mm-hmm. And to a point, I would agree, for a certain amount of time. Like, however the original patent structure, my years might be off. But you do something, you create an invention that's new, you have it for like 14 years or something like that. And you're the only one who can use it. After that, it goes to the public domain. Mm-hmm. But now we're just so far gone. When companies patent something, they have it for an eternity. That's why things like insulin in the U.S. cost so much, because there's like 2 or 3 companies that have patents on them that just run forever. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I digress. Going back to the GMOs, one company was finally able to patent a gene that they had created. And they finally got it in, oh boy, I feel like that would have been late 80s, maybe early 90s. And once they had that
and this is like a food?
Yeah, it was like a specific gene they were building off of it or something like that. And it was originally with a food. But once one patent had gone through, that meant all life could be patented. And so anything anybody had done with a crop could be patented. And that included the natural state of a crop. So every single thing, like if you go to a seed bank or something like that and you take the genetic structure of anything you find, companies patented that. And there was like a gold rush of companies just patenting everything on life. And it's gotten so absurd to this point. Kind of, I guess the epitome of it is, do you know breast cancer is patented?
What?
Yeah, the breast cancer gene is patented. And so there's only one company in the world that is legal, or not the world, I guess, because it's U.S. patent structure. But there's only one company in the U.S. that's allowed to do research about breast cancer because they're the only ones that have the patent on that gene. And so you get into this really fucked up situation where, like, yeah, companies can't, it's not capitalism anymore. It's so far gone than that. It's just companies own all these different things. And then, oh my God, there's so many other situations that go off of this.
Holy shit.
That's so wild. How does a patent, like,
pay off
extend
the
to,
right
like,
people?
gene genetics? Like, that's crazy.
Is this what you learned in econ?
a lot of different stuff. But if you want to look at the worst company for this by far, is look up Monsanto. Monsanto.
Yeah, pull up Monsanto, Gabe.
Specifically look up how many of their executives work and have worked for the U.S. government. why Monsanto is so effective at this is they have sort of this revolving door where somebody who works for Monsanto will go.
Okay, what is Monsanto?
Monsanto is this
It's an agricultural
massive
company?
agricultural company, yes.
Okay.
And they've kind of had this revolving door where if you work for Monsanto, then you go work for the government for a little bit, get a bunch of laws passed that are in favor of Monsanto, and then you get to come back to Monsanto like 4 years later with a huge bonus and promotions. And then you go back and you work for the government a little bit more, and it's this revolving door of all of the people who are supposed to be protecting against things like this, specifically within the EPA. All the people who are supposed to be preventing this don't, because they work for Monsanto. And so the people who are supposed to be writing the laws that prevent companies from doing things like this are people who work for the companies that benefit from doing things like this.
Oh my
And
god.
it's just been
that's like when Dick Cheney worked for like Bear Stearns and shit.
Oh, that's
It's
a
like
great
the same,
example. But
that's the same idea.
yeah, it's a super fucked up scenario. But
Or when Lyndon B. Johnson's wife like owned what, like 40% of the company that or she invested so much money in this company that she technically owned 40% of
let's
the
see,
company.
LBJ. That was the Vietnam one, right?
Yeah. it was in
Okay, yeah,
Vietnam.
yeah. They own controlling interests in
Yep.
all of these companies that made the bombs.
Yep. All the
Oh, yeah.
bombs, all the planes, all the fucking Jeeps, everything.
Oh, yeah.
Like all the Humvee. Oh. That is like the epitome of like completely fucked up insider trading bullshit.
Oh yeah, and if you go even away from the economic, the stuff they've done with different genes that fuck stuff up. Oh my god. Okay, well, one great example is they have built in, I think they have the patent for it. I don't know, but they've built in what's called the suicide gene. So like
The what?
the suicide gene.
The suicide gene.
So back in the day, you know, you're a farmer, you have your crops that year, you harvest the seed, and that's the seed you use the next year. Monsanto has implemented what's called the suicide gene. And so after one generation of that plant surviving, it dies no matter what. And so then it's impossible for farmers to be subsistence farmers, where, you know, you just buy that seed maybe one time, you use it, harvest it, use it, harvest it. You have to go back to the company and buy it again every single year. And where
So like every single farmer like in the United States
the vast majority, yeah.
have to buy from Monsanto.
Yep, exactly.
Have to buy every single year more seeds
Yep,
from Monsanto because they can't farm their own.
yep. They can't collect their own. And even if they collect the seeds from the ones they were using, they aren't going to be able to grow crops with those because they die after one generation. And then there's a bunch of other, oh boy, I'm trying to think of some of the sketchy stuff they do. Well, I guess a good example is crops being Roundup ready. And I can get into like why this is bad in a little bit, but Roundup ready means it's immune to pesticides. And so it's this gene that on the surface is really awesome then, because if you're a farmer and you're thinking about it, you know, worrying about weeds and stuff like that, trying to pick through them, that costs a lot. But if you buy a seed that's Roundup ready, you can just plant the seeds, it grows, throw pesticides over the whole thing, or herbicides and pesticides, and it's going to kill everything else but that plant. That's super beneficial. Mm-hmm. But one thing that's been becoming an issue is plants cross-pollinate. And so all of these little genes that they're throwing in there of the suicide gene, the Roundup ready gene, everything like that, they're cross-pollinating, so they're becoming part of also the natural ecosystem.
Oh God.
Yeah, and that's where you get into a lot of really sketchy things. And it just really sucks because genetically modifying crops, the process isn't unethical or bad, and you can and could do absolutely amazing things with it, but it's just been in the hands of corporations that are extremely corrupt and are doing terrible things with it.
And they're just doing it purely for profit.
Yeah.
That's really all they're doing is it's strictly to make the most amount of money from what they can invest in it.
Which is it sucks, but that's also the goal of a corporation no matter what.
That's the
corporation always responds to the stockholders. So if you think about like the CEOs directing the company, who does he answer to? He answers to the board of directors. The board of directors answer to the stockholders. And so the stockholders, even if they're uninformed, you have this mass majority saying, we want more money. That goes to the board of directors. The board of directors says, hey, we need to increase profits this quarter. They tell that to the CEO, and then the CEO has to do things to increase profits. So it's this weird mix of nobody's trying to be the bad guy. There's not like an evil person being like, oh, we're going to screw people over. But it's all of these pressures that get combined and mixed signals that go through that just create something that the corporation does horrible things when nobody's trying to do them.
I feel like that's just a growing pain, though. That's purely just like a growing. I mean, not the political part. The political part's completely fucked up, and that's like hindering our ability to get rid of these growing pains. But like as like a pure capitalist corporation, if we were in that situation, it would just purely be a growing pain of like we haven't done this long enough to understand that this is actually negatively impacting the ecosystem.
I would argue that it isn't actually.
It isn't.
I would argue that that is systemic from the nature of. Okay, so if you think about you're a shareholder in a company, you buy stock in a company, you really aren't that invested in a company. You know a little bit about them, a little bit about what they do, but you're not thinking about what are they actually doing? What do their operations look like today? What's that going to look like 20, 30 years down the road? All you know is you invest in a company, you want to get dividends, you want to see stock. And if you don't, you use your buying power, whatever stocks you have, to vote somebody else in. And so perpetually, these companies, well, basically almost all corporations that are responsible to stockholders are consistently sacrificing the future for the immediate payout. Because that CEO who wants to keep his job knows he needs to get a bunch of money this quarter. He doesn't care what happens a year down the road, let alone 20, 30 years down the road. He knows if he wants to keep his job, he needs to get big payouts now. And so that's where you kind of get this system where you see nobody's trying to do it necessarily, but you're sacrificing the future for the immediate payout. Nobody has that delayed gratification because that's not the mindset you're thinking about when you're investing.
Yeah, that's true. There is really no delayed gratification in investments. Like, even when people invest in the stock market, they're like, I'm going to have to wait 30, 40 years for this to, double or even triple in profit. Like, they're like, that's ridiculous. That's essentially like them putting their money in a bank and just watching the interest grow. Like, goodness.
Yeah.
All this shit is just such an abstract idea that, like, the general public does not understand, which I think it should.
Yeah.
I think this is like one of the biggest issues with our economy and our country. Like, one of the biggest things is that, like, we're completely about, like, getting money now, right? We're immediately about, like, making the profits now. We're not worried about, like, what it's doing to the environment. We're not worried about what it's going to do to the future population.
You have a bounded rationality where you can think rationally in the short period of time. Honestly, I think one of the biggest issues is just generally like education about it. Even if everybody doesn't know everything that's going on, but if everybody had a basic understanding of finance and education, which I think it's truly a huge disservice that we don't do that in the public schools. Like you get all of these random weird things that you're taught and you get learned how to do, and you learn calculus, but like
you get learnt.
Yeah. How do you do taxes? How do you run a budget? I feel like there's that baseline education that if everybody who graduated from a public school had a little bit better education and understanding, it would slowly feed up and sort of fix a lot of the problems. But yeah.
On the point of education, though, like, do you think our education system is completely flawed in the way that it's ran?
That's a big question. One big thing I would like to know.
Well, let me narrow it down. Public schools. Do you think that education system is flawed?
One thing I would definitely like to point out right now is anything I say about education system in general has nothing to do with the teachers or the people who do that. I have nothing but the utmost respect for people who, like, honestly, if you think about how many math teachers we had, I guess we're not dropping names, but I can think of one particularly who was valedictorian at his school, how much money he could have made if he went into the private sector. And all those teachers who are there, not because they want to make money, but they honestly want to make the system better and make a difference. It's not a problem there, but I do definitely think there is a overarching problem in how the system is set up.
I do agree. I do agree completely. It's teachers are just blatantly underpaid.
Oh yeah,
blatantly underpaid. Public schools are blatantly underfunded, and a lot of people think that like that could be that could be fixed by like the private sector if we privatized like all public schools, like I can't K through 12
charter schools kind of.
Yeah, if we privatized those, like the idea that who's the lady that Trump put into
Oh boy,
Our-
I can
Oh,
picture.
dear God, Betsy DeVos, and she's
Yeah.
the worst person to ever put an education, like the head of the education.
Oh yeah, she
department.
basically said like any school that's not a charter school is bullshit or something like that. Like,
The I think one of the hugest issues that's or one of the trickiest problems to solve is how do you measure education? And I think that's been one of the huge issues we've been facing, not just recently, but I mean, realistically speaking, if you're giving money to a school, you should expect a certain return of education that they're investing in the students. But then how do you measure that? And then the way we measure that has always been standardized testing, which then just doesn't catch everything and it doesn't catch what people could actually be good at.
it's true.
And then we've, sorry.
Keep going.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just gonna say, like obviously some people do well with it. Like I do really good in standardized testing. I don't know why. I just got really lucky. I have some gene for that. But like realistically speaking, there's a lot of people who can contribute a lot to the society and the economy that just don't do well in that.
Yeah.
That you don't see, and you kind of get this system then where schools' funding is based on how their students do in standardized education or on the standardized tests, and then the school doesn't become about education anymore. It becomes about teaching to the tests. Its goal isn't to help these students and these children become I guess, smarter or an effective member of society. Its goal becomes to teach them to be able to take the standardized test and do well.
Secure funding for other, yeah.
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 that's
and
like
it's-
the biggest thing you said. Like, it's really like a curriculum problem, and it's hard to like measure what is important to, like you said, build someone who's like a functioning, well-educated, informed member of society.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the
Yeah.
idea of college, though, isn't it?
what? Yeah.
The idea of college is to,
disagree.
like, isn't it supposed to take like you're supposed to get a general education from high school, and that's like the idea is like you get the basic needs to like function in our society as the way it stands, right? Like you get taught how to use a computer. You get taught how to use certain programs that are going to be very prevalent in like our industry at the time. You get taught basic mathematics. You get taught like basic biology. You just get taught basic education. And that's where like when you go to college, you're supposed to specify. You're supposed to find out like what you like and then do it in that regard.
I definitely agree that college is a specification, but I would like to take a step farther back and say that college shouldn't necessarily be the specification that people are thinking of. I think that's one thing we emphasize super strongly right now that I think we shouldn't be emphasizing. College is right for some people, like you said exactly, for the specified education.
Yeah,
If you get
for
out of
the
high school and you say,
Specialization.
yeah, exactly. There's this specialization I want to do. I should go to college to get this. But I think we've kind of developed a culture around it that it's like you should just go to college, go thousands of dollars in debt, and then figure out what you want to do once you get there.
Yeah, that idea
Um,
is disgustingly corrupt.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a completely corrupt idea. It really is.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of issues with it too. I definitely agree. High school should be a general education, not only so you're, so you're a contributing member of society, but I think kind of one of the linchpins there of why we need to ensure that that's a solid education is that our country is based so strongly on what people vote for. If we're going to have people voting on what we should do as a country and as a nation, those people should be smart. Which is why, like, I philosophically agree with paying taxes to go to public education, because that makes sense. If everybody is going to be involved in the decision making for what we do as a nation, everybody should have a baseline knowledge.
Yeah.
Given you have the fucking offshoots, the people who still think the planet's flat, and like, okay, we solved this like 1,000 years ago. It's not an argument anymore. But I totally think that should be one of the main focuses, but I think there should be a stronger shift too, as far as in like specifically high school, how to be a contributing member of society, or what are the basic things you need to know to survive.
Well, that's
Like-
that's the difference between like us and Europe. Like in Europe, they teach you, like as like a European student. I think one of the most resonating factors with this was when Mr. Richardson was talking about it in his class, and he actually talked about like foreign exchange students that had come here and then they went to school.
Yeah.
And they went to school and they explained like if you get stuck somewhere, like let's say you get stuck in the woods or you get you get trapped somewhere. Let's say like your plane goes down and you're stuck, and there's like there's a German and there's a French student, and then there's like an American. And they say like if you got stuck somewhere, you would want to be stuck with an American, because what they do is they take their general education, they take all their knowledge and stuff like that. And one of the biggest things that our education teaches us is how to apply our knowledge. And that's one thing you don't learn in Europe. Like here, they'll give you a study, and let's say you're writing like a research paper. Here in America, they taught us how to write research papers, but also how to do our research, right?
Yeah.
That same idea. In Europe, you just do the research, and you basically just like, reword things. Cookie cutter ideas.
Everybody does the same thing. This is exactly how you do it. You don't need to think about how you're doing it.
Exactly.
We give you the exact directions. Just do it.
So they're more like data funded kind of people, right?
Yeah.
They're more of like, you're given this set of data. This is what you're supposed to do with it.
Yeah.
With that. With us, it's like, we got this set of data. Okay, how did they get their set of data? How are we going to apply this data to our, bias or what we're trying to prove? With them, it's just like you take this data, you find this data, you apply this data. And I think like they're taught less to think individually.
Oh, yeah.
More groupthink ideas.
I do actually, I guess, kind of have a question for you. I kind of have some ideas on it, but when we're talking about education and stuff like that, that as a society we should have a standard because we all vote, which I 100% agree with. And I guess I'm kind of asking you because, to be honest, my ideas are fluctuating on it. But when you're talking about that, then that means somebody somewhere in an ivory tower has to say, this is the truth, this is what everybody should know. And so how do you think the balance should be necessarily on as far as how much should be taught in public schools, as far as, maybe not necessarily public schools, but how much should be a nation-centered education that the nation says this is right, this is what you need to know no matter what, versus how much do you think should still be placed on like the value of home learning, like learning from parents and stuff like that?
That's a pretty loaded question, to be honest with you.
Sorry, I guess, like, I don't know. I kind of ask it because I'm still thinking about it, but it popped into my head.
Yeah, the idea that I have behind that, and I think there should be a baseline for, like, minimum education that you're required to get when you graduate high school.
Yeah.
And then that's why you have to turn 18 to vote and stuff like that. It's because you're basically, at that point, you're essentially out of high school. I mean, I know there are those people who drop out and stuff like that, and they don't get that
6-year plan.
They don't get that education. But like, I guess there's really no nation standard at this point in time. There isn't a nationwide standard of like what people are supposed to know. It's only statewide.
Okay.
So each state, and each state's roughly the same. So you could make an argument that it is nationwide, but on the whole, it is state funded education. So it's like, we have the mandatory, for Minnesota, it's the MCAs and stuff like that you take in elementary school, and then there are the SAT and like the ACT that you take. Those are nationwide tests.
Yeah, I was going to say, those aren't technically even public school related, I guess.
No.
They're more so just, they've been used as a general good benchmark, I guess.
But no one gets funding by their ACTs. Like, you don't get a national like grant because everyone.
Gotcha. Yeah, the schools don't. Yeah.
Yeah, because every single high school kid from that high school got above a 30. Like, that would be astonishing if that happened. That would be absolutely phenomenal.
I only fucking got a 28.
Yeah, like I know people who got like 14s, and like they let a monkey take that test, and the monkey still got 15. Like,
actually, hold on. I think this is actually brushed over. Maybe Gabe can look it up more, but what the national average isn't that high. The national average, I think, is around like 14, 15.
Actually,
I want to say
no.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Minnesota state average is 17.
Just keep the camera on, Levi.
Take
I don't want
take
people
a
seeing my
look.
searches.
I just want to know what the actual average is, because I thought it was that the Minnesota state average, I want to say, was a little bit higher. And
I would
thought,
guarantee it would be.
I
Minnesota
thought-
has like one of the best education programs in the nation.
I thought our state standard or state average was
nationwide.
17.
Oh,
Well, I'm Minnesota too. Curious what-
So the state average composite score for the ACT is 21.3.
wow, that is a lot
That's
higher than I
actually
thought
pretty good.
it was.
Was
gonna
higher.
be.
Hold on. Was
Higher, that's
national
fair,
than the. Was higher than the national score of 20.8.
Wow, That is much better than I thought it was. I thought we were at like a 17, 15, but
No, I don't think we're that fucking. I don't think we're
Yeah,
that. Dumb.
20.9. That's not bad.
What's the average IQ score?
I fell under it.
I feel like IQ can be misleading though. IQ doesn't mean intelligence.
But IQ tests are like the biggest point to like for what are they, problem solving and like it's
Well,
not like object discern.
I feel like if you look at an IQ
100.
score, it
Okay.
it
what I
misrepresents a lot of stuff because IQ represents potential. No matter how much you work, your IQ is never going to change. Your IQ is your IQ no matter what. And so I feel like it misrepresents somebody, even if they have a lower than average IQ, if they put in an immense amount of hard work, they can be smarter, more intelligent, more knowledgeable than somebody who has a higher IQ who didn't do anything.
But in that field.
Yeah.
But in that specific field of whatever it is. Maybe they're looking up general knowledge and it's just like a general knowledge, like they're more educated on general knowledge than anyone else. But that falls back on education. Like an IQ test is you're right, it is completely potential for how, I don't want to say intelligent, but like how
kind of like how effective or how quick maybe you can catch on and learn, or I don't know.
Deafness.
But
yeah, look up the definition of an IQ test. Like, what's the definition of an IQ? I'm curious to see what that is, because like that's interesting to see. Definition of
Well,
Definition of
intelligence
love?
was on the end of there, but I guess it
say IQ.
didn't follow through.
intelligent quotient. Well, yeah.
Definition of an IQ test.
That's what I was hoping for first.
Well, I feel like intelligence maybe isn't necessarily.
Well, it's an intelligent
know.
quotient
If you-
test. Like,
I'm curious, actually. I'm actually really curious now. I never thought about, but where we got our standards for it. If they base it off of 100, I'm assuming they took a standard measure of some sample group and said, okay, well, let's put it on a standard distribution, and we'll put dead center and say that's 100.
well, that's average. That's like the average IQ
Yeah.
kind of thing. I don't know. It's yeah. Definition of an IQ test.
Mental age score obtained by administrator. Oh, boy.
So historically, IQ was a score obtained by dividing a person's mental age score obtained by administering an intelligence test by the person's chronological age, both expressed in terms of years and months. The resulting fraction quotient is multiplied by 100 to obtain an IQ score. So intelligence quotient.
So it's a ratio of your.
So they're basically just comparing you to
Other people your age, essentially.
other people your age, like how
Okay.
they're doing.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a relatively decent way to.
I'm surprised 100 is considered average. I was trying to think, because isn't like 130 or above considered genius level? Which I feel like seems
Yeah.
not
Might have
that
been
much
50.
higher.
But, we'll see.
It might have been 150.
Because if it's based off of a straight ratio, I suppose on distribution, I guess I don't know what 30% looks like. I don't have a Z table memorized in my head, but
whatever the yeah.
oh, okay.
Highly intelligent is 150.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, not 130. That would be
Yeah, well,
super-
that's what I was thinking of. I thought it was based, or average was lower than 100, so I was thinking about 130. I was like, that can't be right.
That's all right.
Very gifted.
There you go.
Oh,
Very
that's
gifted.
oh,
That's offensive.
okay, hold on. That's only 2.1% of the population, though, is a 130 and above. Wow, that is not a lot.
Well, that makes sense. Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That does make sense though. Like if you do look at the bell
Yeah,
curve,
there's
like
some
it's
balance.
equal on both sides.
All your people on
It really is. Like people who are, what is it? Mentally disabled is less than a 70 IQ, and
I was
every
just
time I think of a 70 IQ, I always think of the documentary of Making a Murderer. But
I always just think of Al Capone. He was mentally handicapped.
yeah. What do you have? Like a 60?
Yeah, people thought he was
68
like
or
a genius, and
66.
they arrested him, and they did some IQ tests. They're like, wow, he was
Well, he
not
got
that bright.
He got arrested for tax fraud. Like the one he could have just gave.
He wasn't like a
money.
really good crime lord. He was just like the first guy who tried to do it, and then it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a no-brainer. Like, why not just essentially create like this, operate this crime operation where you're
Oh boy, yeah.
where you're just running the city at that point. Like you're
Well, I was gonna say even Chicago back in the day, they had like an open standing agreement or an open arrangement basically where if you were a crime lord, you could operate in Chicago as long as you didn't commit crimes in Chicago and you'd never get arrested.
really.
Gabe, do you want to help me out on this one?
I feel like that's
Yeah, I'm
What kind
pretty
of,
sure,
like,
actually.
crime lord statistics you want me?
Or like something about the Chicago arrangement, where basically it was like if you don't commit the crimes in
Chicago crime arrangement. Look that up.
I don't know if that's the terminology, and it would have been back in the day. I was gonna say it's pretty fucking bad now. It's more deadly than most war zones. So
Yeah, Chicago's pretty rough. What is it? What do they call it?
they also have some of the highest gun control, but you know,
They
people
call
like
it-
to look at the actual stats.
Chirac or whatever? Because
Yeah.
more people die in
I
Chicago.
can look up again.
I guess it's kind of hard to look up
That
in
is
broad
some-
terms.
That is some. That is
Something
hard to
about
look
like
up.
historical Chicago. Oh boy. Basically, they wouldn't arrest people in Chicago if you didn't do bad things in Chicago. Like, you could be a known crime lord or have a warrant out in other places, but if you're in Chicago, you're okay.
That's really fucked up. So I wanted to ask you about, because you're a pretty politically intelligent person. On the whole, higher than average. You're
I was
politically
gonna say, that's a broad statement.
politically intelligent when it comes to like higher than average. But like, what do you think? What's your take on like the protests and the riots going on?
Oh boy.
I wanted to ask you this question. I know we can talk. We could talk all night about economics, but I want to talk a little politics with you too.
Okay. Oh boy. So, as far as like the George Floyd protests, whether I agree with like the response to them, protests, yes. Rioting, no, because it just wasn't unrelated. Now, don't get me wrong.
It wasn't unrelated.
Because okay, hold on. Let me back up here and just say, as a disclosure, I don't necessarily endorse all these ideas because I'm going to be put on a terrorist watch list for it. But I'm just saying.
You're already on. Your Google searches are.
I
probably
try to
fine.
take care so that I'm not. I did get taken off of TSA Preferred though, so I think they might have caught on to a little bit.
TSA preferred.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Would
When
you fly a lot or something or what?
Yeah, like you can. It's kind of like they assume you're not a risk. You can go through with less security. Yeah,
You basically just walk up to a metal detector.
Yeah,
that's
I
it.
Taken out.
How'd they take it? How'd you find that out?
I was informed by a letter that I was taken off of TSA Preferred. So I don't know. Maybe I'm on a list, but I don't really know. It's not like the TSA does a damn thing, anyways.
No,
But
you want to hear some of the funniest shit? So this kid I went to Itasca with, who now goes to NDSU. He's Turkish. He's from
Yeah.
Turkey. He's here on like an education visa, right?
yeah,
And his favorite thing is guns. So he
Why not?
has
They're
like,
fucking awesome.
oh yeah, he loves guns. But like in his, in his little fucking like archive of like PDFs and shit. Like he has PDFs
yeah.
on like how to make a gun. Like how to mill out and like manufacture every single part of a
Why
gun.
wouldn't you?
And also how to like manufacture bombs. Like he loves like all that information.
Yeah.
He doesn't use them, obviously. Like he doesn't act on them.
You have to do it a couple of times. It's fun, but
Yeah, but it's still just like the fact that he has them. I was like, dude, you're on a watch list, like for sure. That like government,
especially because you're Turkish. Too.
especially because he looks like he had, he's super. He's got like the full blown
Yeah.
beard with like no mustache and like he's super hairy, like, and it's just like the perfect. And he's
Yeah.
a super big introvert. Like it's honestly like there's so many grounds for like the NSA and FBI just like busting down his door.
Well, you don't have your constitutional rights anyways in the first place. The NSA Project Trailblazer, you lost that a long time ago. They can look.
Wasn't
at
that the Clinton administration? Wasn't it?
Oh boy, I don't know when they started, but that would have been Snowden. As far as him leaking it, that was the thing. What the
That was
stupid
under
thing too is they had a couple
Bush.
different options. Yeah, the Patriot Act I'm also very against because they're basically like, well, if the government decides it, you don't have any more rights, so fuck you. But yeah, that's a whole other fucked up
That's a whole
situation.
other can of worms we could open.
Well, that's why I use like Tor and Onion and stuff like that. They originally originated in, I want to say China, because China has such harsh restrictions and stuff like that. But
Yeah, we should get on that political idea because it's already 5:30. So
sorry, yeah. Going back to the protests and stuff. Yeah, that was just stupid. The protests, 100% in favor of. The riots, what did you gain from burning down a Target? I'm not saying violent
Recognition.
protests are necessarily maybe negative, maybe it'll put me on a list, but I'm saying burn down the government's mansion, like something like that. There was a lot more effective targets you could have hit if you were trying to make a point that just wasn't hit, and it was more so just anger, and we want to be angry because we're angry. Yes, you can be angry, but if you're going to hit targets and burn places down, at least make sure they're worthwhile targets to hit.
Okay.
That's like Tactics 101.
That's
I suppose,
that's
but
a fair.
I don't
that's a
know
fair
if
answer
like
to that.
Or like okay, let's
there's
say
there's negative flack to
if
be
you're,
had about just randomly burning and destroying, but I don't know if I would have picked like the governor's mansion. Like, corporate America can be burned and destroyed, but I feel like that might be a step over the line. Like attack our like mayor, our governor.
why not? I'm just saying if you're looking
I mean,
at
like
at the people
Mayor
who are
Frey's an asshole. I hate
responsible
Mayor Frey, but
for these laws and things like that, those should have been the ones targeted instead of just random generic like businesses.
That's true.
Like my sister lives down in Hennepin County. She lives next to a Wells Fargo that got broke into like 7 times. Like they had nothing to do with anything. People were just breaking in to steal stuff. Like if you're gonna make a point, make a point. Don't just burn stuff down because you feel like it. Like
Well, one of the things I saw about it was like people have been protesting this for years. Like it had been protested all the way back to like the Rodney King riots, and even prior to that, like people had been protesting about it. And it's just the fact that like their voices were really never, ever, ever heard.
If we're going back that far, I almost feel like it was the same situation that happened in Detroit. Kind of like the downfall of Detroit is you have all those protests, burn things down. Anybody who has money who can leaves as far as tax-paying citizens go. Any companies and corporations or honestly small business owners is a big part who had things there, don't want to have businesses anymore, so they leave. And then taxpayer money goes down, the protection that they have goes down, and it just starts this huge decline that it doesn't accomplish what it was set out to accomplish. There was a point to be made, and that point should have been made, but how people went about trying to make that point was not effective.
I mean, if they had strictly gone to just pure like if there had been 0 riots whatsoever, and if they had just gone to pure protests, I guarantee the nationwide coverage and like the effect of those protests would have been like a fraction of what they were. A fraction. Because
that definitely is true. One other thing too is grouping them all together, because the protesters and the rioters typically were very different people.
Different people.
During the daytime, you had peaceful protests. People would clean up what happened the night before. They wanted change. And then as soon as it started getting nighttime, those people went away, and a whole other group of people came out who didn't want to protest, and they just wanted to burn stuff down.
It's true.
And then you group this in. People who actually wanted to see change and make differences in the government to get rid of systemic racism.
Yes.
Those people who wanted to change weren't heard almost at a point, because they would try to make a point, but then you had this whole other subgroup that didn't actually really care anything about that were just trying to burn stuff down, and then you group them all together, and it just wasn't, I don't know, if you're honestly looking as, let's say if you were somebody trying to make a change, it wasn't how you should go about trying to do it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be angry about it or stuff like that, because you 100% should be. But the way that anger was demonstrated took away from the movement, as opposed to adding to it, I guess, is kind of the overall point.
Okay. And since we're a little crunched on time here, I know you wanted to leave by 5:30, and we're already past that point.
It's okay.
Well, you actually you had somewhere to be at 5:30.
Yeah, it started 9 minutes ago. It goes till 9. It's just barbecue.
Okay, sounds good. I didn't want to keep you super, super late.
Yeah.
So what do you think we could change in our policing tactics as for like police reform, or do you think like defunding the police is a good idea? What would be your take on that concept?
I am incredibly torn in all directions on this one. The biggest thing I would start out saying is there is no one solution. Nothing should be done in broad strokes. I think that is honestly a huge issue. As far as making changes, is one person does a bad thing and then everybody trying to do good things gets grouped in with it. Like, honestly, if we're going back to the protests, you have protesters trying to make a good difference. You have rioters who do something bad. It all gets grouped together. Oh. Nothing that you're doing, no changes you're making should be sweeping, all-encompassing, anytime I hear statements like everybody should or all of these should, oh boy.
Well, I mean, just to put it into perspective, like, it's not just the George Floyd case.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just those cops that are assholes, that are, you know, complete scum of the earth that caused that issue. It's not just Derek Chauvin that did this. There's other indications of, like, police officers. There was a police officer in, I think it was Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I could be so wrong about this. There was a female police officer who actually stopped a white officer from administering a chokehold on a black suspect. That officer was choking the black suspect, and the female officer came up and and told him to stop because the man was handcuffed. He was already subdued. He wasn't causing any issues, but she ran up there and she's like, "Hey, fucking, you know, quit choking him out." And she actually ended up getting fired from that police force. So she got fired and canned from that police force. She got a bad reputation. She no longer can get a job as a police officer in her profession because she actually did the human right or the human correct thing. So, like,
I guess the biggest thing I definitely want to note, and I think is glossed over a lot of the time, is know the context. Don't look at a 30-second clip. Obviously, George Floyd, horrible. Also, an odd side note, I don't know, I was hearing some quotes from people who worked with him, and apparently he maybe wasn't necessarily racist, but they said he would have done that. They're like, oh yeah, he would have fucking killed, like, whether they're an old lady or Mexican or whatever, but I don't know. Yeah, apparently he was just not a good dude. But
George Floyd?
No, not George Floyd, the cop who choked him out. I'm forgetting his name.
Derek Chauvin.
Yeah, the people who worked with Chauvin basically said that about him, like he would have done that to anybody. Which means, obviously, yes, terrible person, but it just brought up a lot of issues we've been having. The biggest thing I would definitely say is know the context, know what happened. I think there's a lot of, I don't know, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. With how...
There's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, with how exposed and how quickly things can get... can spread on social media and internet like that, it's very easy to spread information. So, which is why I'm teetering on lines and stuff like that. I'm not making like a direct stand on everybody should do this, everybody should do that. I think before people start making sweeping statements like that, know what happened in that exact situation, gain more knowledge about that,
and try to learn from it.
Yes, and I don't know, because the sort of like the sweeping thing with like defund the police, like that's. I
don't think that's a good idea at all.
Yeah, or like the Minneapolis city's like, okay, we're just gonna get rid of the police.
Well, they're not getting rid of the police. Like it's mainly just like the U of M no longer it's mainly just like the U of M no longer.
No, that was a thing. I'm trying to think. There definitely was something they were talking about of trying to like rebuild the police from the ground up, and they weren't going to call them the police anymore. They were going to start everything over, fire every police officer they had, and it was getting passed by the majority of the city council.
I hadn't heard about that.
But the biggest thing I would definitely say is
I did hear about that. Yeah, you're right.
Is don't group people together because of the profession they do. Know what happens in an actual situation, and I don't know. I feel like sorry, keep going.
I feel like the way they should look at it is kind of like how our judicial system looks at a lot of like cases, right? Like we specifically we look at cases where certain things were passed, and we apply them to current cases that people are in. That's why like lawyers are so well versed on like historical cases that had happened, like Roe versus Wade.
That's a lot of them.
Exactly. That's huge, especially in like criminal law. Like that's what they
study.
study.
Yeah, precedents for everybody else.
It does, and that's one thing that I think police officers, or that I think like the police force should learn from, is that they should take these incidents. Like the George Floyd incident, for example, and they should no longer allow like chokeholds or kneeling on someone's neck.
Yeah,
that should
the
no
kneeling
longer...
on someone's neck. I would like to double check, but I am quite confident that is not something that is taught at any point. That they're like, yeah, you should do this.
Happens a lot.
Yeah.
There was a 13-year-old in Atlanta who had a police officer while he was handcuffed on the ground. First of all, do you understand how hard it is to get off of the ground when you're handcuffed?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's impossible. You can't, if you're laying on your stomach and your hands are cuffed behind your back,
Yeah.
what you have to do to get up is you have to sit down and then push your back up against something. Or if you're an athletic person, get your feet under you and then stand up. And in which case, a police officer or, anyone in that situation could probably just put their hand on your back and you wouldn't be able to get up. Like, in that entire situation, that is... The fact that he was kneeling on his neck while he was handcuffed on the ground was the most disgusting thing about that, and that's what ultimately killed him.
100%. I'm in. If I haven't been clear about it, I am in no way saying or advocating that is. Okay. Yeah.
You've been
I wanted to
clear.
double check that. I am in no way saying that was okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just I feel like it's unfortunate to see how much people get grouped together by whatever social demographic you're with, that one person in that demographic does something, and then everybody in that demographic is, everybody acts like him.
Well,
I think you see that with racial disparities, but I think at least hitting home for me, because I have one brother who's a police officer and one who's going to become a police officer, and I know them, and I know they're really good people, and seeing people like that.
I know your brothers too, and I imagine if they're police officers, I wouldn't see why anyone would ever have an issue with them. They seem like very rational, very intelligent people that are going to handle the situation to the best of their ability. It's
kind of that same thing, though, where when one police officer does something bad, that obviously is horrible and that shouldn't happen. Like,
that's not always the case. It's not always just... I've been on police brutality. Like, I've been on this subject for years, even before the George Floyd, all this whole thing that has been going on. I've seen countless police brutality videos, and one of the biggest trends that you can see is that, like, the department is okay with the violence that police officers are committing. And it's not just every department. It's not just a couple departments. It's roughly every single department where, like, police officers have the ability to write their own police reports, right? So they get to actually...
How you do write a police report. That's what a report is the police officer saying what happened, and then somebody else has a different statement. But yeah.
But that's the grossest thing, is because when the police officer says, I have that example where the police report from the George Floyd case, he had a medical episode and he died. They never said anything about someone kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes. 8 minutes and 46 seconds?
Something like that, yeah.
8 minutes, 46 seconds. That was not in there at all, in that he was asphyxiated. He had a medical episode and died, was their recount of it. And I think that's the most disgusting thing, is the fact that they get to write their own reports of what... They get to basically tell the story of what happened. It's like history is written by the winners.
That's a really interesting point to make. Okay, in that situation, it's a lot more complicated, obviously, because somebody died. But you do also, the police report is hence the police's report. So the police who were there are reporting what happened.
Yeah.
You also can report something else and say something else happened.
You can.
And then you go to court.
But even...
I will definitely agree there is obviously a disparity in saying what happens.
But even in, like, court cases and indications like, or in situations like that,
who do you believe? Are you going to believe the police officer or the whoever is accused of being a criminal and stuff like that?
9 times out of 10, well, even more than that, I'd say 99 times out of 100, they're going to take the police officer's side, and it has happened. In the case with Breonna Taylor, they took the police officer's accounts for that, for what happened. They said that she had, they said that she resisted and she pulled a gun on them, that they had indicated that they were police officers multiple times before busting the door down, which in their own body cam footage actually proves them wrong. Like, the whole Breonna Taylor thing is completely fucked up, and it shows that, like, not only is the Minneapolis Police Department, like, not only is their tactics corrupt, but it's almost all the police departments. Like, the police officers, they know exactly how much their department will let them get away with. They know exactly how much they can do before they get in trouble.
So yes, how you were saying officers know how much they do before they get in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, how you're saying that, I guess, I feel like, I don't know, I kind of take a different stance on, because yes, how you said is they know how much they can do before they get in trouble, but more than that, if you're a police officer, you have your job that you're trying to get done. And when you go work for a city or whoever you're working for, you are given those directives.
Standards, yeah.
Yeah, that's the department policy. So that's kind of, it's not like you're trying to, I don't know. At least I kind of felt like you're trying to frame it like all police officers are trying to hurt people as much as they can within policy, but you're trying to do what you can. You're trying to accomplish your job as well as you can, and you're given a policy by your department on how to do that. And if your policy says if they do this, you do this, and then that's what you do. And then the policy says if they do this, you do this, and that's what you're trying to follow.
Well,
And
yeah,
so-
there are multiple different policies. Like even in California, I don't remember exactly.
or like city to city, department to department, it changes.
It does change significantly. Like there was I talked to this guy. This is a side tangent necessarily, but there was a guy I would work out at the gym with, and he was a real cool guy. But
Yeah.
he showed me that he was a police officer in one of the most deadly policing cities in the nation. It's in California. It's in like a northern.
LA.
No, it's in the northern part of California. And there was a guy that actually robbed a bank in LA, and he was doing a police chase through up through northern California, and he was trying to get to Canada. He was trying to escape to Canada, which is like, why wouldn't you just escape to Mexico if you're that far south? But he was trying to get through California and get out of California so he could get into Oregon, where I think their policing is like far less violent,
Yeah.
and then make it up through Washington and get to Canada. But there was a city that he was driving towards, and this city is notorious for drug trafficking. So their police force is almost has to be militarized. It almost has to be. And they really don't ask questions, and they shoot first. That's really the policy that they have there, because it's the only policy that they can really enforce safely for their city. And he said, like, on the dispatch, he could hear when he was there. He was in that situation. He said, take his car. Like, they said, shoot at his car, take his car out before he gets there, because if he gets there, those cops are going to kill him. They're going to shoot him on sight. And that's just going to happen. And that's a different department policy, right? That's the point I'm trying to make, is like, that's a different department policy for the city that they're living in, because they're living in a different situation. But it's not the department policy that they're following. It's the fact that they know that if they tell the chief of police, hey, he reached for my gun, and that's why, I put him in the hospital, or that's why, 6 officers went over there with batons and broke his knees. But if that's not at all what happened, like, you can't really prove that he tried to reach for your gun. It's just a recount.
That definitely is like an interesting argument as far as you're looking at who says what and who always gets believed most of the time.
But it's a hive mentality.
Another point I guess I would kind of like to make is you see the ones that are bad. If you think about how many times something bad happens and it's horrible, it should never happen.
But nothing happens to them.
But I'm saying,
To the ones that are bad.
how many thousands of arrests in the United States happen every day?
Peacefully. Like peaceful arrests.
Exactly. And I'm saying, yes, it's terrible, but there are going to be one or two. Well, I don't know what number, but whatever. like the ones that get the most attention and the most media, I guess kind of should. But I feel like you see 1 out of a million happen, and then that's assumed to be the standard when it really isn't.
Yeah.
That is truly an outlier that should never happen. We should take steps to make sure that doesn't happen.
It is true.
I don't think that's necessarily a standard, but I think it's an expectation when you get into a certain demographic of people. I think necessarily that's what we're focusing on.
Okay.
Not necessarily, like you said, every cops are terrible.
Yeah.
Whatever. Your brothers are obviously like good people.
Yeah.
And like,
And I imagine there'll be great police officers.
and
Yeah.
there are good people in there, but it's just like those 2 guys that were kneeling and that other dude who like did nothing. It's when you see like somebody who might necessarily outrank you, like Trenton said, it's kind of like a mentality, like we're all gonna work with you, and it's like they don't feel like they could be their own person or necessarily said or like stand up or something. And
Like the lady who got fired from the police station for stopping, a
'cause,
clearly
they think
immoral
that's the
chokehold.
expectation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. What? Okay, bye. Yeah, that's like the expectation. But one thing I wanted to make pretty prevalent on this podcast was you watched the George Floyd video, right?
Yep.
Did you picture yourself like being there? Did you like because when I watched it, I pictured myself. I was like, fuck. Like, if I was there, I might have been so upset. I might have attacked a cop, or I might have like pushed the police officer off of George Floyd. Like, when I thought about myself being in that situation, it made me so angry that like nobody else did anything, or I would have started like yelling, causing ruckus. I would have thrown something at the officer. Like, at the very least, I would have thrown something at Derek Chauvin. I guarantee I would have. I would have taken anything I could have and just whipped it at him and then taken off running. And more than likely, I would have been caught. More than likely, I would have been arrested for assaulting a police officer, and I'd have a criminal record for the rest of my life. But I know for a fact that I would have done something good in my mind, with my morals. But did you picture yourself being there at all? Did you imagine, like, what if I was a police officer in that situation?
What would I have done if I was in that situation? If you were a police officer in that situation, that's...
But, I mean, when you pictured yourself, where did you picture yourself?
I guess as a bystander.
Exactly.
Hold on. Let me make a point, though. Everybody would have loved to do something because of hindsight bias. Hindsight is 20/20.
Yep.
Everybody likes to believe they would have done something.
But here's the thing. I
don't
didn't even
think anyone would have.
So when that video,
nobody did.
I pulled that video up and it was on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And when I was watching, I watched the full 9-10 minute video or whatever it was. And it started when the officer, like, when they restrained him on the ground, and then Derek Chauvin kneeled on his neck.
Yeah.
And like 2 minutes into the video, when he was like yelling for help and stuff, like my immediate reaction was like, do something. Because like he's not supposed to be kneeling on his neck.
Yeah.
And like my immediate reaction was like, I think a police officer should come over and pull him off. And I was like, if I was a police officer, I would have like tapped Derek Chauvin on the shoulder and been like, hey, like get off of his neck, like kneel on his back, or kneel on his, or just like sit on his back or something. Like that's a lot of pain,
Yeah.
That would have been my thought. If I was a bystander, 2 minutes in, I would have probably thrown something at him or said like, hey, get the fuck off him, or caused an issue or something, just to like take the attention off of him and try not to incriminate myself. Like that's what I saw when I was there. But I was talking to Gabe about this, and it was the most like revolutionary thing I had heard, and it made me, it really opened my eyes, because when I watched the video, I was like, what if I was a cop? What if I was a bystander?
Yeah.
I never thought of myself as George Floyd. I never thought that was me. And that was the difference between me and Gabe, is Gabe told me like he saw George Floyd there and he saw himself being knelt on.
Yeah.
And I was like, no other white person saw themselves in George Floyd's shoes.
Yeah.
None of us did.
Mm-hmm.
But every black person saw themselves as George Floyd. Every
Person of color.
minority. Every minority saw themselves as George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it in that aspect, it opens your eyes to the anger. It opens your eyes to the violence and the brutality that they have been facing for years. So that's why I wanted to ask you, where did you see yourself?
I definitely saw myself as a bystander.
Exactly.
I think we are running a little short on time.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But I would absolutely love to get in sometime to, as far as why statistics work out the way they do. In as far as when you're looking at like systemic racism, if you look at, okay, why is a disproportionate amount of arrests happen from this race versus another race and stuff like that, I would definitely love to get into that. Because I think there's some deeply rooted like socioeconomic issues that are very prevalent that cause a lot of issues in there too. But
that's a great point. But I want to get you out of here because I don't want to keep you any longer than I've already kept you. So we can call it essentially right here.
Like
it was
3 hours.
Yeah, it was great. It was great to have you on, man. I love talking to you about the economy and politics. I mean, we can get into politics and statistiks.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's nice to go on a podcast because this time when I talk, people have to fucking listen because they have no choice.
That's a good point. Well, it was awesome to have you on, man. We'll get you on again. Is there anything you wanted to promote? You got any like social media people can contact you on if you want to? You don't have to. I don't want to pressure you into that.
I was gonna say, if you look me up on Instagram, you can find me. But I think that's a compliance nightmare if I start promoting things right now. But
That's all right. That's all right. Well, hey man, I had a great time talking to you. I had a great time on this podcast.
Definitely loved it.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.